All right, and we're live. Illegitimate Scholar here with Doc Brown once again. I think the fourth time. I think you've now beaten out. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name. That's embarrassing. A guy I'm close friends with. You've now beaten out that guy, Wayward Rabbler, Brad Pierce, for the most appearances on the show. He does like geopolitics stuff. He's going to come back on again soon, I think. But Doc Brown, fourth time here. Thank you for coming again. You send me
Thanks for having
coffee
me.
each time that you come on, which you can
Yes,
stop doing as I'm overfilled with coffee from the Pacific Northwest now.
really? You can
Yeah,
never be overfilled with coffee from the Pacific Northwest, but that's fine. It's
yeah.
a cultural difference. It's yeah, okay. I will
No, it's
stop
just
sitting.
because I only use the mocha pot at home, and I spend most of my time in Pennsylvania with my
Okay.
girlfriend, and she
Oh,
has a
okay.
freaking like we both run businesses. We're way too busy to like do that.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. But yeah, I have my mocha pot from my ex Italian American girlfriend who had all these Italian things about her, including the crazy. So we're all good
Well,
that that's open.
as we've tweeted back and forth that it is my culture's drug of choice. So it's very prot to send
It
to
is.
have coffee. So yeah, as I
That
think I said to
is.
you too, you're one kind of Irish. I'm the other kind of Irish, if you know what I mean. Good
Yeah,
old
it's
plantation Scots. So we
right.
work hard.
You
Yeah.
orange bastard.
We have drums. We play our drums quite loudly. Yes. So.
Yes, of course. So Thor hair doll. I just want to address that. I don't know if I told you guys live on stream. I was in a bookstore, an old bookstore in Texas of all places, and I found a first edition copy of Thor Heyerdahl's book Kon-Tiki from
Have you been to the
1950.
museum
No, I haven't.
in Oslo? If you go to Oslo, the Kon-Tiki Museum is very cool. Yeah, it's very
Mm.
fun. Yeah.
No, I never been to Norway. I was supposed to go with some other video creator guys who's been on the show before, but I got very sick. Not even COVID. It was something else. I was bedridden for like a week when I was supposed to be in Norway. It was awful.
Dang. Yeah.
I might go to Iceland with them early next year though.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. I think I might. I'm going to be interviewing Graham Hancock here at the end of the month.
No big deal. Just Graham Hancock.
Dude, I mean, obviously, it's completely surreal. It's amazing. But I think I might give him that book that I just got. I'm not sure yet, but I think that would be a good gift.
The Kon-Tiki
Um,
movie is pretty good too. The Norwegian film that was made maybe about
yeah,
10 years ago. Yeah.
I watched the Kontiki movie actually in an anthropology class. I don't
Oh,
remember
cool.
which one. It was probably maritime.
Yeah, would be.
Um, yeah. So let's talk about it. What are we going to talk about today? We're 3 minutes in. We didn't talk about crap.
That's yeah.
No,
Talking
we
about
did. It's all relevant. But
yeah,
Doc
language.
Brown, linguist. We're going to talk about echoes of past languages, stuff like that in new languages. I pretty much give you free reign to give me a linguistics topic, and you can come on and talk about it, and I'll sit here and listen.
You're very kind
Um,
in that. Yes.
no, dude, you're
Uh,
very kind. You're the one doing all the work here.
I do this. I think about this stuff regardless. It's just nice to be able to talk to somebody who appreciates it, and also the dear listeners who appreciate it. So thanks again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about. So the fancy pointy-headed term is linguistic substrates, which is not going to get many people to click on this link. So I suggested to you we call it language undeath, which is
hmm
very metal and appropriate for spooky season.
Yeah, and I can't use the word death in the titles
Oh,
and
that's right.
descriptions
Yeah.
just because of YouTube will flag that. Like they're not gonna. The AI doesn't understand it's
Yeah.
metaphorical.
Yeah.
Um, so,
The
but yeah, that would have been a
it would have
cool
been yeah, it would be
thing to
cool.
call it.
Yeah, yeah, deading. I don't know, something like that. Even that might
Unaliving.
yeah, unaliving. There you go. Yeah. So basically, we'll see where it goes because we'll see what strikes your fancy and what the people of the dear listeners type in, and we'll try to do our best to make them happy. But
Yeah.
looking at how
Well, first, by the way,
yeah, sorry,
guys,
good.
Doc
Yeah.
Brown right below. Links to Doc Brown's Twitter. Go check him out. I know you guys love this. I do as well, and I know you love it because I love it, and you're here listening to all the things I love about all the things I love. So yeah, keep spamming the chat. That's totally fine. I'm not gonna stop anybody from spamming. Thank you for joining us. And go ahead. What do you want to start with? What do you want to start with talking about? I got a bunch of links here to share while we're out here.
Maybe I could start just giving a general overview as just of like what we mean when we say a linguistic substrate.
Right.
If that works. So in some ways, we'll see how it works out today. I had sort of thought of this as being kind of a follow-up episode to the previous, or rather a follow-up live stream to the previous live stream you had me on about pigeons and creoles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, since that one was pretty well received, it seemed like. Um, when so there's something called a substrate in linguistics, and that essentially means, so when you get more than one language contacting each other, rubbing up against each other, as we talked about last time, you have sort of various things that can happen. Sometimes you can get, words that are borrowed in. I think we looked at the word raccoon and opossum last time, which was fun. It was very fun.
That was fun.
You can also get sort of these new languages that are birthed out of this extreme language contact situation. And we looked at Pidgin and Creole languages, the tok pising bipo bipo tru that made everyone, or at least you, laugh.
Yes. And I went through like a minute-long disclaimer about how it's perceived as them being stupid, but it's literally not that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. Another thing that can happen when languages contact each other is that, unfortunately, one of the languages in the contact situation can die. And so
many such cases.
Yeah. And so it's tempting to say, well, when a language dies, it's completely gone forever. There's never any record of it. It's like wiped off the face of the earth and history. And there are cases of that, sadly. That does happen. Yeah. It can happen.
And I think most languages today are endangered. Most surviving languages are at least endangered. They're going out with the global world, unfortunately.
Yes.
Huge loss of culture.
Yes. There's roughly, depending on how you count a language, there's around 6,000, between 6,000 and 7,000 languages, roughly speaking, based on how you count a language, left in the world, and most of them are very endangered. Most of them very endangered. So I think we talked about one of the times I was on about I actually went and did some field work research on not a dying, but an endangered language in the Philippines. We talked about that. So it's unfortunately a thing that happens, and as we get more connected as a global culture, that is going to just become more of a thing.
Yeah. Keep talking. I'm just going to pull up some stats here from a language resource that I use from a website.
Yeah. Yes. So there's many endangered. You can see there's a lot of endangered languages. There's stable languages, but there's a lot of endangered languages. And then obviously the number of extinct languages continues.
And this extinct number, by the way, if you're looking at the screen, is for languages like since they started looking at this. There's since they started gathering this data. So I don't know, probably goes back to the 20th century.
Yeah.
But like before then, I mean, there's way tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands more extinct languages over time.
I mean, there's a lot of languages that we'll never know what they were like. So a lot of this is it almost gets into the realm of speculative historical linguistics, where you think about, I don't work in this field, but I do enjoy reading people who work in this field. I could probably send you some links after the fact if you wanted to put them up. I don't have them with me right now, but people who look at stuff like what would have a Neanderthal's language looked like. And obviously we don't have any records of Neanderthals speaking, but you could look at things like their jaw shape and
morphology.
Morphology, and be like, how would this have affected their sounds? Stuff like that. I mean, the earlier models were that Neanderthals were stupid, but that's not the case. They were very intelligent.
Yes. Neanderthals were not. Neanderthals is, by the way, I know it's spelled Neanderthals, but like, if you ever talk to an archaeologist, just say Neanderthal, because if you don't, they will completely condescend you.
Well, it's actually named after a real place in Germany, the Neanderthal, the Neander River Valley. I've actually been there. There's a really cool Neanderthal museum if you go there. I highly recommend the Neanderthal Museum in West Germany. It's very cool, very fun. I reconnected with my Neanderthal ancestors there. It was a very spiritual experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the whites in the chat have Neanderthal DNA in them, and I think Asians as well.
Asians have it's Neanderthal and Denisovan.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't make heads or tails about the Denisovans at all, just because like there's so much weird stuff about them. Less research than Neanderthals.
yeah. So obviously, like, we don't know what a Neanderthal would have spoken. So, but we would assume that they would have spoken something, and there probably would have been multiple languages. And so we can look. It's not a one-to-one, but it's what we have. If you look at like, I know that there's no such thing as an uncontacted tribe, and you're big about pointing that out. But if you look at
Mhm.
less modernized groups, let's say, I'm trying to think of a way that's accurate and not condescending to say that. You tend to
Yes.
see a
More
huge amount of
insular cultures,
more
more
insular
insular
cultures.
societies. Yeah.
You actually tend to see a huge amount of linguistic diversity. So an example that we keep bringing up, I keep bringing up, is Papua New Guinea. If you look at the island of Papua New Guinea, there
It
are
is a
so
cultural anthropologist paradise. It's like
yeah,
the place.
there's
So diverse, by the way.
so many
Incredibly diverse
languages.
in language, culture, everything.
Yeah, huge amount of linguistic diversity. That is oftentimes seen as kind of a holdover from what the deep linguistic past of humanity would have been. There would have had, if you're living in tribal groups, whether you're stable in one location or moving nomadically, you would have, like, each group would have at least wildly divergent dialects, if not completely unrelated languages. To
Right.
bring it back to our typology,
And there's like 20
lecture.
language families
Yeah,
on the island.
yes,
Like
completely
it's
unrelated.
crazy.
Yeah, they're it's not like they're all part of one group. That a counter example to that is maybe uncontacted Australia, where you did have several large language families. Anyhow,
Right.
yeah, it's so that would have been something of like, that's probably indicative of the deep past of humanity. We'll never recover those languages that, like, the Neanderthals or Cro-Magnon were speaking. We just will never know. And so when you think about language death, yes, language death is a real problem today. We should do our best to preserve and revitalize the languages that are spoken today. Of course, right? Only a madman would want language death.
Mhm.
But it is the sad truth that, like, most of humanity's languages are lost to us, and we'll never
Right.
get them back. It can be depressing, right? Like, I think that's a depressing thought. I think normal people would find that depressing.
I think everyone here, at the very least, finds that depressing because
Yeah,
everyone here loves culture.
right.
That's why we're here.
So
Gotta
it can be
drop
a
the
total,
Obi-Wan meme in there, but yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
you're good. It can be a total black pill. However, there's this. So to bring it back to language substrates, a substrate is a language that kind of, you know, um, that exerts influence. So language A exerts influence on language B, but through via indirectly. How can we tell that there's such things as language substrates? Well, we can look at sort of current languages today as they're currently spoken, or as they were spoken in the past, if we happen to have recordings or like written records. And via linguistic magic, we can attempt to make educated guesses as to why certain things look out of place. Um, I'm going to use the example language of English, just because it's the language we're speaking right now, and I do believe it's the primary language of most of your listeners. Or if it's not your primary language, you speak it well enough to understand what we're talking about here. And so I'll just it's for better or for worse, I'll use English as kind of the go-to example.
Hmm.
English is a language that has supplanted many other languages via just historical movement of English speakers. I mean, the United States is North America is an example of this. At least Canada and Anglophone Canada and the United States.
We don't
But
talk about French Canada here. Keep going.
yeah, there's no Canada like French Canada. Anyhow,
Sick. Okay. The South Park reference, if you
yeah,
didn't get
South
it,
Park
but
reference.
yes.
Um, but like, English is a fascinating language, and I don't just say that because it's my native tongue. It's a fascinating language for many reasons, because English shows so within English, within the history of the English language, there is just so much influence from outside languages, from languages that are not English or were not English. Um,
Right.
and
It's a Frankenstein language, I
it
like
is a
to call it.
Frankenstein to a certain
I think.
extent, right? So I think
Mhm.
we've talked about the Normans invade England, and yes, Ireland. I know, and you and I are angry about those because I'm mostly Anglo and you're mostly, yes. You got the Irish for you.
800 years of oppression.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but
No,
yeah. um, but regardless of the complexities of the history of the British Isles, you know, Norman French doesn't exert a huge amount of influence on the structure of English. It introduces a lot of new words. So
Right.
we have a lot of Norman French loan words into
And we should like
yeah.
just to get it out of the way that like the language family that it's a part of is usually having to do with like the underlying structure of it,
Yes. Yeah.
much more so than the vocabulary and
Yeah.
everything.
Any borrowing words in does not change your language's family. That's a good point. So like
Right.
English is a very strange language, and it's a member of the Germanic language family. It's probably the strangest of the Germanic languages. Afrikaans is also kind of strange, and by strange I mean that in air quotes. I mean that in like historically unique in some respects.
Hmm.
But
And
English had a
Afrikaans is like a what do they call it? A crap, I'm forgetting the term. It's a
so
syncretic, which I don't know if I don't like using the term
it's
syncretic that much because everything in culture is
I'm gonna
syncretic.
say this is fraught within the field. I would say
Oh,
Afrikaans is an example of what's called a quote unquote new world variety, in that it's a language that pulls up stakes and moves to a completely different part of the world. Afrikaans is a Germanic language. It's clearly descended from Dutch. However, it shows significant influence from local South African languages as well as Malay because of
Malay.
Malay speaking laborers.
Really?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
and Malay being the language of not only Malaysia but also Indonesian is basically
Indonesia, where were the
Malay.
Dutch active?
That
Indonesia.
makes a
So,
lot of sense now.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we could do an episode on Afrikaans probably later, but yeah, but English is also strange in that English is clearly a Germanic language. There's people out there who try to claim it's not. No, all of our core vocabulary, our main basic words that we use for main basic things, ma, mother, father,
Yeah.
brother, sister, like these terms, run, jump, eat, sleep, all of these basic, like the basic core parts of the language are Germanic.
Right.
However, we have all these other words like interrogate, justify, like the huge amount of other words that are clearly been loaned in from either directly from Latin, but oftentimes sort of their Latinate loans via Norman French. Okay, so
Right.
English
And
has
a lot of
yeah,
languages, a lot of words from the elite as well, because it was a
yes,
hierarchical
yes,
diffusion from like we talked about that as well. This is
we
like
did,
a
yeah,
pork versus
beef or
versus
no,
pig.
pork versus pig, beef versus cow, yeah, these
Right.
kinds of things. But so that's just a lot of words, and hey, words do affect your language, but it's not like the structural things have changed a whole lot because of Norman French contact. But English, uh any variety of English that's currently spoken today, whether it's wherever somebody speaks English natively, uh the language actually, so this is going to, again, I can say it here because this is a safe space, this is going to piss some people off, but I really don't care.
Yeah.
There is some strong evidence. I'll hedge a little bit. I'm not going to say objectively this is true, but there's some strong evidence that English, even earlier stages of English, showed substrate influence from Celtic.
Oh,
So
really?
yes, and so
Like
what people
Proto-Celtic? Like I assume that's
well, let me explain
Brittonic.
it. So there was this
Yeah, go ahead.
narrative that's been largely disproven that the Angles, the Utes and the Saxons invade, Britain and massacre and genocide
Yeah.
all of the Celts, and that they're pushed back to the north and to the west, into Wales, into Scotland, and it's, oh my gosh, it's just this like, war of destruction. That's a
It
very
never happens.
It never
That's
happens, because even if you want to do that, which again, I don't think the Anglo-Saxons ever wanted to do that. They wanted to seize control, but you got to have somebody to till the fields. You got to have some. You
right.
can't just kill everybody. That's ridiculous. But even
Yeah.
if you wanted to, this is clearly like a 20th century inspired story of like genocide. That, like, how would you do that without mechanized like weaponry and stuff? So
Right.
this is that I just that narrative is thankfully falling out of favor in the history circles.
Well, it became very obvious when people got DNA tests, and
Yeah.
you can barely tell the difference between British and Irish DNA.
Yes.
Like it's like
Exactly. Yeah. It's like
there's more R1B in Wales, Brittany, Scott, like in Celtic countries, but it's not that big of a difference.
it's minor. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
minor. And so this, yeah, so the genetic evidence largely disproves this. I'm not saying there wasn't killing. I'm saying there wasn't this. There wasn't this. We're going to just completely wipe out all the Celts and then just build Anglo-Saxon England. That's not how it worked. It's just not how history usually
Yeah.
works. It
A
does.
lot of people died, but it wasn't an extermination.
I don't even know how many people died. I mean, I don't know. Again, these we tend to view history through like a nation state post-Westphalian mindset, but that's really not how the
Yes.
Middle Ages worked at all. It was
Right.
like I said, even later when the Normans go in and take over from the Anglo-Saxons, it's not like they're killing all the Anglo-Saxon peasants. It's just you have Norman rulers now. I mean, it's just
Right.
like, oh, I guess, what's the line from the Who? Uh, say hello to the new boss, same as the old boss. It's like, like it's, I don't know. It's just elites want power, and then they'll
Yep.
swap out, rotation of the elites and whatnot.
And there's many cases of this everywhere. I mean, China was the same way. They had
Yeah,
a Mongolian dynasty, they had a Manchurian dynasty, they have like it happens everywhere where elites move in, they take over. It was very common up until the early modern period, and later in a lot of other parts of the world besides Europe, for the elites of a place to be from somewhere else.
yeah,
Even sometimes by design. Like the
yeah,
Ottoman Empire was mostly run by Balkan people, for good reason. Yeah,
yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah. So with that, what does this have to do with language substrate? Well, up until very recently, the going theory was, mean Anglo-Saxons come in, kill all Celts, so sad, and then say we're going to speak English now. Okay, well that's not really what happened. What happened is that you have Anglo-Saxons come in. Yes, they take control. Yes, they start having Anglo-Saxon babies. Yes, they establish kingdoms that eventually do end up under Alfred the Great, becoming a sort of a unified England. But that's sort of the political history of how that happens. What about like how that actually works on a socio-linguistic level? Well, what are you going to do? I mean, you have the Anglo-Saxons who are speaking Old English are coming in. Oh, that's now the prestige language. Okay, if you're somebody who maybe a few generations ago spoke some sort of earlier variety of Celtic language, well, maybe you or your ancestors had to learn English, because now we need Old English, not what we currently speak. You had to learn Old English. You had to learn Anglo-Saxon. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever, you or any of the dear listeners have ever tried learning a foreign language when you're already an adult. I don't know if you've had this experience. I do recommend it. It's tough. It's tough. And so obviously I'm very biased in that I've done this and I teach language. So I still sort of part-time teach foreign languages. It is a great, I don't make a lot of money, but it's a great fun to teach people foreign languages. I think it's awesome. I will say though, the foreign language I speak the best is German. And it's, I've been studying German for about 15 years now, something like that, give or take. I would say I speak German very well. When I speak to Germans or Austrians, they're always kind of blown away that I can just seamlessly switch into German, because they don't expect an American to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So
Especially because most of them speak English. So there's like no
right.
point in
Yeah.
freaking learning it.
Yeah.
But good on you for doing it anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's safe to say that I don't speak German like a native speaker. I mean, I speak
Why would
German
you?
really well, but I'm still, there's words, there's specific vocabulary I do need to look up. Every once in a while speaking, I make a slight, syntactical error, something like that. And so it's safe to say that I don't speak German like a native speaker. I speak German well, but through the lens of my native language, which is American English. And so,
Yes, American.
Now imagine that's a one-off, example. Imagine if all of a sudden, like everyone in the Pacific Northwest or in the Northeast had to start learning German all of a sudden, like really quickly. All of a sudden, you have to start learning this or German or Spanish or Russian or whatever it is. It could be anything. You're going to learn that language in a reduced way because you're an adult. Adults have a much harder time learning language. Most adults are not as autistic as I am and want to spend 15 years perfecting their foreign language. Most of them will learn it, quote unquote, good enough. right?
Right.
And maybe you've had this experience. Most people have, I think. If you've ever worked in customer service in a metropolitan area, you'll get people who come in and don't speak English very well, but they kind of speak it enough.
And they have a
And
contextual understanding
they
of
have
it
a
as well.
contextual, they can understand a lot more than they can talk. They'll go in and maybe say like, I want to have one. I want to have one, right? Okay, I would like one is how a native speaker would say that, but they have a reduced way of speaking English. I want to have one, and they'll still usually be nice, right? In my experience, I want to have one, please. And that's not a grammatically correct statement, but you can kind of make it work, right? You're like, oh, you would like one, okay, thank you, right? And they'll and you could even pair it back to them. Oh, you would like to have one, and they'll say, yes, I want to have one. So their English is just at a restricted, it's a restricted ability with English because they've had to learn it. Maybe they're like 40 years old or something like that. They've come in to wherever and they're doing their best. So imagine that like en masse. You're going to have people speak English in a different way than maybe the native speakers would. And what happens then when you have an entire community who switches languages halfway through their life and then they have kids? Those kids will be native English speakers, but they will speak it differently than like somebody whose family has been speaking English for generations will. So if you expand this out at scale, what happens is you start getting substrate influences where the older language that used to be spoken by that community exerts an influence on the English that they now speak. I don't know if this
On that
makes
dialect.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is so it's not like it's not that there's a bilingual situation. Oftentimes the community will completely switch over to, in this case, English, but it could be some other language. But even though it's been like 4 generations since anyone ever spoke something, whatever it was, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, whatever, there's like little sprinkles. There's bacon bits of the earlier language left in the way that they speak, in this case, English.
Right.
So this does seem to have happened in relatively early in England. English does all sorts of weird things. We use this do as a support verb. Do you want that? Do you have any chocolate? I mean, these are weird things to say. Most European languages would say, want you that? Have you any chocolate? I mean, most European languages would phrase it like that. But
and then
English has this
when it's entered into English, it's going to be like with the rules of however it was spoken, like syntax wise in the past language.
Speaking of
right?
syntax, I mean, no other European languages really use do in this way, except.
Oh yeah, there's a talk of that going on in the comments, by the way. And also I do want to say, like, check out that last episode on Creole languages if you haven't seen it. That's another live tab on the Illegitimate Scholar channel.
Yeah. Except that, so very few European languages use do in this way, except Celtic languages. Celtic languages, particularly Welsh and earlier Welsh, are known for using a verb for do alongside other verbs. Now, people will sit here and scream, not you, but will scream at me that that's not true and that couldn't possibly have exerted any influence on English. But it's like, well, come on. I mean, if you have 2 languages coexisting for a long period of time, early English, Old English, and earlier forms of Welsh, maybe just maybe, if those Celtic speakers are having to learn English, their Celtic background is going to influence the way they speak English.
And you could also compare that to other Germanic languages. Like, I think the closest is Dutch, right? Like Dutch
doesn't use do weird. Like we do.
There we go. And that should show you it came from somewhere. It must have come from Celtic. That's the most reasonable. But that's the most reasonable explanation.
Yeah, it's akin to like, if you live in an area where, like, I'm trying to think, if you live next to a coffee roasting facility and you're like, you step outside every morning and they're roasting the coffee and you're like, man, the air smells a lot like coffee. That just must be a one-off and a random thing. And literally right next door is like a coffee roaster. It's like, what? Or like, you live next door to a bakery and every morning you get to smell fresh bread and you're like, this is just so strange that the air smells like fresh bread. That just must be random. And then you go back in your house, it's like, or maybe there's a bakery right next door. So this idea is very logical. It makes sense. We have many established examples of it. Unfortunately, in linguistics, the idea that any Celtic language could have exerted influence on English is largely just discredited, which is really sad. I gave him a shout out last time, so I'll shout him out again. John McWhorter, a linguist at Columbia University. He's written a whole book on this called Our Magnificent Bastard Tongue. And it's a great book. He makes a very convincing argument. The book is written really for specialists and non-specialists. If people are interested, you can get it pretty cheap on Amazon. Our Magnificent Bastard Tongue. But yeah, so that's an early example of Celtic influence on English.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to pause for a second. Please like the video, number one, if you're watching this. Subscribe if you're not. And also down below, the Patreon is $2 a month. I'm going to be adding more stuff to it. Eventually, it'll go up to $5. I want to add in office hours, like just a time for people to come and talk if they want to. I'm going to be adding that soon. See if people like that. Maybe no one shows up. Don't care. But that link is down below. So check that out, please. And then there was something else I wanted to say. Yeah, and the sponsor Axios Fitness. He's really good. He's really helped me out a lot. He's a personal trainer. There's some free templates that he's added below, and you can check those out to do workouts that he does. And then if you sign up with him, I think the lowest is $25 a month. Well worth it. Like, you know, you have to help your body. It's great for me because I need personalization because of some chronic injuries I have. So, you know, ask me questions about that if you want to, not now, but later. And check him out. The links for all of that are down below. If you get on the Patreon at $2 a month, when it goes up to $5, once I feel I'm providing $5 worth of value, you'll get locked in. And then I would, if you can answer Ironheart's question here, all Celtic languages or just the Brythonic
mostly the Brythonic ones. Yeah, mostly
okay,
Brythonic.
Sweet.
Yeah. So it's a theory. It's hard to prove it, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense. This idea breaks sort of the earlier narratives about sort of like how the Anglo-Saxons moved into England or into Britain. And so, yeah, that's an example of early influence, substrate influence on English. But you know, since English has gone all over the world, and many other people have moved from other parts of the world to English-speaking countries, you can see a lot of English influence in America, for example. Or rather, you can see a lot of substrate influence on English in America. So, if you wanted to start with some example clips, we can do that.
Yeah. I got them pulled up and ready.
So I'm going to have to do a little bit of an intro here. Otherwise it'll just be fun clips that won't make a whole lot of sense, I think. So, and if we can start in Chicago.
We're going to start in Chicago. I love
Chicago. So Chicago is, obviously a major metropolitan area. It has, a notable history of immigration from Central Europe. So, and obviously other parts of the world too now, but if you think about like earlier history of Chicago, you got a lot of people moving there from places like Hungary, places like Poland.
Shout out Hungary.
Yeah,
shout out the Magyar brothers.
Places like Poland, places like Germany, places like Austria, things like that. So, you know, there's kind of it's sort of a stereotype, and obviously they play with it quite in a fun way in various movies, like in this case Blues Brothers. But there's kind of this stereotypical Chicago pronunciation, and so if you want to just play 1 second here, if you want to just play that clip there, pay attention to how they say the word God.
First you trade the Cadillac for a microphone, then you lie to me about the band. Now you're gonna put me right back in the joint.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
Okay. So Elwood says we're on a mission from God.
We're on a mission from God.
God.
Freaking, yeah, I love that, man.
So
great movie.
Yeah, it's a fantastic film. It's one of the best films ever made. And Dan Aykroyd's just an amazing man. Sorry. So if you want to so now how would you pronounce the word God?
God.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
got this preppy New England accent.
you got the
going
New
on.
England thing going, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm from the great Pacific Northwest, and so I would say God. But I think in both of our pronunciations, the final sound would be something like a D, right?
Right.
Okay, so I think let's see. If you want to, I sent you a couple transcriptions screenshots ahead of time. If you want to pull up the one on screen, there you go. Okay. So this is IPA, not the drink that you drink, but the International Phonetic Alphabet. So this is, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. I can give a little brief overview of what this is used for. So this is a transcription method that linguists all over the world use to transcribe sounds as they are pronounced. So like in English spelling, our spelling system is just a way of taking words and putting them on page, but it doesn't have a strong one-to-one correspondence, right? So like I would never spell the word God as it's transcribed here, right? I would go G-O-D, but those are letters. Those are not the same things as sound.
Right.
What the IPA is therefore is to let you actually write down how somebody's pronouncing something. So this is obviously very important for linguists because we care a lot more about how somebody says something as opposed to how something is spelled. So I think, my pronunciation, I transcribed the first one here based on my transcription or my pronunciation. So apologies for being somewhat egocentric here. God. G. So you have this ah vowel. The ah vowel is shown with that A there. G.
Yeah.
Ah.
And this isn't like the English alphabet. I mean, it is the English alphabet in the sense that it's the same letters, but this is like this is an international way of pronouncing. Like if you go to Wikipedia on any word, it has in parentheses the like the pronunciation of it. And with longer words, it's much more complicated.
Yes. A good place to go to find these is actually Wiktionary. Speaking of Wikipedia, like Wiktionary will give you like sort of the standard pronunciation transcription. So that very top one there is the standard American pronunciation of the word God. Okay. So now it's difficult because there's tire squealing and there's Motown music in the background. But if you listen to the way that Elwood says the word God, he's not really saying the first one here.
Right. It's like a longer A, right? Or something.
Well, it's the A is different. So yes, obviously the vowels are different. But if you want to look at that consonant, so the D at the end of the word, he says something like, "We're on a mission from God." God.
Yeah.
And so that it's difficult to if you're not used to listening for this, but the D is actually becoming something of a T there. We're on a mission from God.
Mm-hmm.
God. He's not aspirating the T, so he's not saying got, but he is not.
What does aspirating mean in this context?
Aspiration is where you kind of put a little puff of air after the sound. So
that makes sense.
The word English does this all the time. So like the word team, we're gonna work as a team. I'm aspirating my T there because English tends to aspirate certain sounds at the beginnings of words. So like you wouldn't say team, you would say team, with a T. But if but oftentimes when certain sounds are coming at the end of a word, we don't tend to aspirate them. So, okay. But the aspiration is not so much the issue here. The issue is the fact that the D is becoming a T. A D is becoming a T. If you want to do this, you can do this. It's kind of fun. You can take your fingers and put them up against your voice box, against your larynx. And if you want to say a T and then say a D.
Where's my larynx?
So it's like roughly around your Adam's apple.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you
say a T or like a word with a T.
Yeah. Say the word team and then say the word dream.
Team, dream.
Which one had more vibration?
Team, dream.
In the beginning of the word. In the beginning of the word.
Okay. Team, dream. Oh gosh. I mean, this whole rest of this podcast is going to be me saying words while holding my Adam's apple.
Poor
team,
Sam.
dream. I can't tell. They feel both the same to me.
Yeah, and it's largely because you're not used to thinking like this, because normal people don't think about this. Normal people just speak a language. Only weird people like me think about like, how am I pronouncing
I bet the Decepticons think about their Adam's apple a lot.
that?
You know what I mean by
I know what you
Decepticon
mean.
here.
I do know
Yeah.
what you mean.
Yeah.
So I'll spoil the answer here.
Team Dream.
So,
Dream.
Dream, right. Now why
I cheated. Minoan made a comment.
Yeah, no
But
vibe on T.
yeah.
Exactly. No vibe on T. Amen. So so the reason there's quote no vibe on T is because so T's and D's are more or less the same sound. The difference between these two sounds is whether your voice box, your larynx, is vibrating or not. Tuh-duh, tuh-duh, tuh-duh. So on a D, you're actually vibrating your voice box. You're vibrating your larynx to make that D sound. So in linguistics, this is called voicing, quote unquote, voicing. So we would say that a D is the voiced version of a T, and by extension, a T is the voiceless version of a D. With me so far? Hopefully people are picking up what I'm putting down.
What do you mean voiceless?
So the T is the version of a D that does not have larynx vibration.
Okay.
Your voice box is not moving when you say a T. It is moving when you say a D. So the place of articulation in your mouth is more or less the same. It has to do with whether you have voicing, whether there's a vibration happening in your voice box, in your larynx.
When I make the duh and the tuh sound, the tuh has the aspiration thing you're talking about. Like there's air coming out of my mouth.
Only because, well, so say the word cat.
Cat.
Yeah, I guess you have aspiration there too. I'm trying to think of again, English tends to aspirate our certain kinds of consonants in English tend to be aspirated, so it kind of obscures this. But just vibe with me for a second here. Like well, this will make more sense when we keep going. So basically D and T are more or less the same sound. The difference between them is whether you have voicing, whether there's vibration happening in your larynx. That's what the main difference between them is. Okay, so back to Elwood, back to Blues Brothers, all the spiz. So most forms of English will pronounce the word God something like God. Now the vowel might be different, right? In England, you might hear something more like God. Okay, fine. There's a difference of a vowel, but the D is more or less going to be D in most varieties of English. However, in Chicago, there is this thing that tends to happen, not with everyone, but with many speakers of Chicago English, where the D will become something like a T. That is interesting. This doesn't just happen with D's and T's, though. It happens with S's and Z's. And so here, if we want to go to, I'm trying to think of a good example. Can you go to the Saturday Night Live Bill Swirsky's Superfans? The Bears?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a classic SNL bit here, if people know this.
That is known as the Bears.
The Bears. Okay.
Classic. Back when SNL was funny.
Back when it was funny. So now, again, there's going to be some variation between you and me because we're on different ends of the U.S., but we're both Northerners, so we're probably going to have some similarities in the way we pronounce this word. How would you pronounce the plural of bear? See, the first time I was on here, we talked about bears. It always comes back to bears with me. Bears and wolves. How would you pronounce the plural of bear?
Bears.
Bears. And I would say
bears.
Yeah. So if you want to pull up the transcription I sent you that looks like starts with a B, the weird looking B thing that I sent you.
I just exited out.
It's fine. I can send it again if you need it.
No. I got it. I
okay.
Pull the tab back up.
Okay. So most Americans would pronounce the plural of the animal bear as the first one here. Bears. So again, these are phonetic transcriptions. These are what you're actually saying. You would never spell it this way. It's what you're actually saying when you make this word come out of your mouth. Yeah. Bears. There's a Z sound on there, right? But now they're playing it up for comedic effect in SNL, but it is a thing that people in Chicago do. And that's that they tend to pronounce the plural of bear as bears.
Bears.
not bears. Bears.
That's kind of
Dog
cute.
bears. It is cute. But it's actually something that's very fascinating that's going on here, because again, even though that's a SNL example, it's a thing that people in Chicago do. They do this. I have, people from Chicago I've heard it happen, and people from Chicago don't necessarily notice that they're doing it. So
Right.
if you think,
I have to say this right now.
Yeah.
Like some people, like when somebody says the words, and this is unfortunately so common. Oh, I don't have an accent. It's like, oh my God, you're
everyone
so
has an
embarrassing.
accent. Everyone
You're
has
so
an accent.
embarrassing. Yeah, it's like
Everyone has one. Yeah.
It's so common in America where like people they don't know anything besides like the people around them, and they think somehow like I guess they haven't thought about it enough, but like obviously you have an accent. It's like they think that the American accent is just and by American accent I mean like the standard Northern American accent, even though there is difference between like Midwest, West
Yeah.
Coast, and Northeast. Like obviously you have things like Boston and New York accents, but like the general accent is an accent. It's so obnoxious. Like it's embarrassing to me as an American to hear another American say, "I don't have an accent." Like you culturally illiterate swine.
Yeah,
But sorry,
everyone has an
continue.
accent. You're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine. It's good to vent. It's vent.
Yes.
Yeah. No. So if you want to hold again, even if you want to hold your fingers up to your voice box, and you want to say a Z sound and then say an S sound for me. So go zzz, and then say s. Okay. So
I can't even really make that sound.
Well, what sound does a so one is the sound that a bee makes, and the other one is the sound that a snake makes. Zzz, 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 zzz.
Okay, wait.
Okay.
But the sound a bee makes is. Do you like jazz? All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I hate myself. Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. So in IPA transcription, the one that's the sound that a bee makes is spelled as a Z, and the one that's the sound that a snake makes is spelled as an S. So most speakers of English will, so even though we spell it with an S, they'll pronounce that S at the end of bears as a Z sound. Bears. Yeah. Do you like jazz? Yes. Yes. Jazz is okay, I guess. I'm more.
No, you don't have to
guy.
I've just pulled it up on the
blues
screen,
guy
man.
Myself.
Don't
Yeah.
let it distract you. Yeah.
So what's the only difference really between a Z and a S? Oh, it comes back. Yeah. Okay, Minnesota, chill out. Just slow your roll.
Yeah. Chill out, Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota. Like, oh, for
Southern
please,
Canadians.
Please, yeah. It's just they're South Canadians indeed. Which is not an insult. We like Canadians.
Yeah, they're all right.
yeah,
I mean, especially Albertans and
Albertans are awesome.
Manitobans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
And the
between-
Maritime provinces. Sorry.
Maritimes,
Not
yeah,
forgetting
yeah.
about you guys. My other
Maritime
New
and
English
Newfies.
brothers in the
And Newfies.
up top
Yeah.
Snow Mexico place.
Yeah. So the difference between a Z and a S is really just whether your voice box is vibrating or not. So this is
Oh, that one I tell it very
there you
much.
go. Okay, that one's easier to notice, huh?
Slithery
So-
little snake. Okay.
This is interesting. So we have people in Chicago who tend to do this thing where they take the voice away from certain sounds at the end of their words. And it's not a normal thing for English speakers to do this. It is a very distinctly Wisconsin and Chicago thing to do, and other parts of the upper Midwest, but particularly Chicago and Wisconsin. It's very curious. It's very strange. You could write it as a one-off, just an interesting little regional dialect. Well, of course it's a regional dialect, but maybe there's a reason for that. So to circle back to the immigration history of the upper Midwest, who moved en masse to Chicago and particularly Wisconsin? Speakers of German, people who spoke German. When they came over, they did not speak English, or they did not speak English well. They learned English as a second language, and they pronounced English as a German would. So if you want to think about a stereotypical accent, a German accent, they will say things like this. Yeah. Do you want to find the bears? Where
It's
are
very
the bears?
Bavarian, what I'm hearing.
Well, but if you think about a stereotypical German accent, where are the bears? I need to know where the bears are, right?
Yeah. That
So,
still sounds very Bavarian to me. I know
right,
most people like aren't making a difference between
right.
German accents, but the Bavarian one is so
Yes,
distinct.
I pick a stereotypical German accent just because.
Usually when people think about a stereotypical German accent, they are thinking of Bavarian though, because it's the
Yeah,
funniest one.
it is the funniest one. I love the Bavarians. Okay, so
Also, yes, love Bavaria.
why
Sorry,
is this
guys.
important? Because in German, you tend to take the voice, at least in most varieties of German, there's regional variation. But in German, many German dialects, the same thing happens. You take the voice away from certain consonant sounds at the end of words. This is so something like the word so the word for land in German is spelled land, but most parts of, at least the northern and central parts of Germany, would pronounce that as Land,
Right.
even though it's
Deutschland.
spelled with a D.
Deutschland.
Deutschland. Yeah,
Pronunciation is
they're
terrible on my
taking
part, but that's all
they're
right.
taking the voicing away from the D's. So what seems to have happened, and you get this in so many instances in Wisconsin, Chicago, Upper Midwest English. What seems, it's a theory, but I think it holds up, and many linguists have made this argument quite more convincingly than I'm stumbling through here today. So thank you for bearing with me. Is that
Well, I'm interrupting you with B movie memes, so
that's fine.
partly my
That's fine.
fault.
It's your
but
show.
sorry.
You can do. It's your show. Yeah. So this is most likely an example of what happens when, over 100 years ago, a large group of people from one language group move to a new place and learn a new language. It's not that people in Chicago, by and large, still speak German. By and large, they don't. It's not that everyone in Wisconsin speaks German. By and large, they don't. But maybe their great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents did. And so enough of the people moved in later in life, had to learn English as a second language, that it influenced the way that their children who spoke English natively spoke English. So this is an example of a substrate influence here. In this case, it's German influencing certain varieties of American English. And it does seem to be the reason why Chicago has this like got cars, bears thing going there, right? And in Wisconsin, you get that even, actually, Wisconsin has it in some ways more. Wisconsin actually has this in some ways stronger than Chicago does now. Or let's say the Chicago English is changing and it's being more retained in Wisconsin because Wisconsin's more rural, I would say, is probably part of it.
Right.
By and large. So that's one example of substrate influence on American English. Another, if I can ask a few questions of you to put you on the spot more, I know you're a Hiberno-American, proudly so.
Yes.
With
Magyar
substrate,
admixture. Yeah.
Magyar substrate. Yeah. So I don't know. So again, I have no idea how you're going to answer this question, because I'll just be a wild card here. Does anyone do you or anyone in your family, would you ever substitute the word like himself or herself for he and she? Is himself, like if you're calling on the phone, like, oh, hey, I'm calling for Danny, is himself there? Do you ever?
No.
Does anyone ever say that? Okay. Yeah. No.
No, we don't. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
The latest in my family, like my grandfather was Hungarian as a first language, and so I think that would have more of an influence than the Irish. But no.
Okay.
I would never say that.
Okay. Yeah, and you're even younger than me, so this is probably something that's getting sadly weeded out of Boston. I'm thinking of like roughly like Irish influenced Bostonian English or New England English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty far out from Boston. I mean, culturally, Boston Irish, definitely, but like not
okay. Yeah.
Not on that level.
You're not like Southie level. Okay. Yeah. If you do go to places that still have a stronger kind of Irish American cultural unity, particularly in parts of New England, you will hear things like that. This is not my dialect, but my dissertation advisor, that's his native dialect of English, is actually Boston Irish. And so he had so I know this straight from the source, right? Like I can speak to that. You will hear things like, oh, is himself there? And you're like, is himself there?
I would never say that. I've never even heard of this.
Is he there? Yeah. And so that is an example of something you find in certain kinds of particularly culturally Irish Boston English that comes right out of Ireland. Irish English in Ireland today, you'll hear the kind of stuff like that all the time. And so you may ask yourself, well, is that just maybe a weird, quirky thing in Ireland? It could be. But if you know anything about Gaelic, which I know very little about Gaelic, but there's this in Gaelic, oftentimes you'll have this
They generally also in Ireland, by the way, they generally just call it Irish. They don't call it Gaelic. Gaelic is like Scotland.
But
I know that that's like
but here we have to
right.
distinguish between Irish English and Irish. So Irish Gaelic versus Irish English. So
got it. Irish Gaelic would be the full thing. Yeah,
we have to parse it a little bit finer here because we're dealing with, again, multiple languages coming into contact with each other.
So we're talking about Irish Gaelic here, which is also correct, but normally colloquially in Ireland called Irish rather than Gaelic.
What's
it's like
the
a pet
name?
peeve of them.
What's the name of the Irish political movement that sought to get the northern counties back? Starts with an S.
Starts with an S.
They were engaged in, let's say,
Sinn Féin.
Sinn Féin. What does Sinn Féin mean?
I've forgotten what Sinn Féin means.
You've forgotten. It means we ourselves.
No, I don't think I knew that then.
Yeah,
I don't. That doesn't ring a bell at all.
Okay, yeah. So it means we ourselves. And so there's a thing that Irish Gaelic tends to do in all Gaelic languages, but particularly in this case, Irish Gaelic, where you can emphatically refer back to the pronoun by adding féin, which means itself. So Sinn Féin, we ourselves. You don't need to have the féin in there, but you oftentimes will include it to really underscore that it's us. It's us. It's we ourselves. Sinn Féin. And so féin means something like self in Gaelic. And so what has happened in Irish English is that even though most people in Ireland sadly don't speak Gaelic anymore, Irish English has so much Gaelic influence living just under the surface, a substratum, a underneath, because of the way that English was, in some cases voluntarily and in many cases involuntarily, forced upon the Irish. That
right.
So
when you say Gaelic there, are you talking like the multiple different types of Gaelic from like Scotland?
What I mean is when people in Ireland start having to speak English, they speak English through the lens of what their native language originally was, which is Gaelic. So much so that even as Gaelic dwindles, and it's not dead yet, hopefully it doesn't die, but it's holding on.
Right.
And
seen a revival, as is Welsh.
But most people in Ireland don't speak it, at least not natively. It's not their primary language. But
there's some weird places on like the West Coast that do.
Yes, there's the West Coast communities that hold on to it. But even in like Dublin, for example, very few native speakers, people who are raised in Gaelic, very few. But the English spoken in Dublin, the Irish English there, and many other parts of the country too, shows a huge amount of historical influence from Gaelic. So this is what I mean about like the haunting of what I was talking about, the haunting of Irish English by Irish, right? It's there, it's just under the surface. Is he himself there? We ourselves, Sinn Féin. Like, so that's just one example. Another example, and again, I'm not a Gaelic expert, so I'm going to do my best to not even try to pronounce the Irish because I'm going to butcher it, and it's a beautiful language and I don't want to butcher it. But there's a thing that Celtic languages, not just Irish, do, but also Scots Gaelic and Welsh. I can speak a little bit more to the Welsh. There is no word for that's a complex thing, by the way, what you've just said there, Finkel. That's a complex question there.
It is.
It's a very complex thing.
We could do a whole episode on that. And we actually, I did have an Irish nationalist come on the podcast a while ago. That's in the Illegitimate Scholar podcast playlist if you want to check that out. It's like episode 51 or something, and we touched on that because there was a push. Like there was some like just people doing it for economic reasons, as well as some actual like there were laws to subdue the language. Both of them are true, but it seems like economic choice was the more important factor. It's impossible to tell how much.
It's difficult to parse that completely out. Yeah, this is the complexities of history. Anyhow, so like in one of the things that kind of sets Celtic languages apart within the broader Indo-European language family is that they tend to not really have words for yes or no. Yeah, I'm an Anglo. I don't care. I am Anglo and Scotch Irish. I have to abide by the rules. This is
The worst of the
this is-
worst.
This is the
Both of
kayfabe.
them.
I have to. We all play a role in history. This is my job. I am the settler. Okay. Yes.
Oh God.
Yeah. This just I am bound by my genes. Um, I'm joking here.
Yeah, we know. That's all right.
Okay.
We're all in America
This
now.
is a joke. This is a joke.
The Irish, the orange men and the greens are hand in hand now. It's all about mass immigration. It's
Yeah, I
different things.
Yeah, that was a heartening video to see too. It filled me with some hope.
It did. Yeah, it was very nice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it also means there's a larger enemy now, more dangerous than the English, which is insane. But yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that sets Celtic languages kind of apart and is something unique is that they don't really have words for yes or no. Which is weird. It's just weird from an English speaking perspective to think about that, but you actually don't need words for yes or no in your language.
Okay, you can elaborate on that, I hope.
Yeah, I'm gonna elaborate. So like this was relayed to me by somebody who did a bus tour through Wales, and I know this person, so I'm gonna use this as an example. And so she, it's a colleague of mine. She's doing a bus tour through Wales, and you hope that she doesn't discover a werewolf on the moors. If anyone's watched American Werewolf in London, you know what I mean. You're in a bus tour through Wales, and she's waiting for a bus at a bus stop, rural Wales, and the bus driver, bus pulls up. And so she's, my colleague does not speak any Welsh, so she's gonna, speak in English just out of necessity, and even the Welsh speaking Welsh also speak English,
right.
And she managed to find the bus driver who clearly had, I think, Welsh as his native language based on the way he spoke English, and she says, "Does this bus go to Cardiff?" Right, so it's a location in Wales, and the bus driver responds, "I do."
I do.
Yeah.
Good Lord. That is
so,
foreign.
Yeah, and so you're like
he's the bus.
Yeah, well, or he's
him and the bus are one. He takes his job very seriously.
I do. So that statement, "I do," is an English statement, right? That's an English utterance, but it's not how people, at least in America, would respond. It would say, "Yeah, yes, it does," or "Yeah, the bus is going to Cardiff," but he didn't say yes. He said, "I do." So Welsh, in a similar way to Irish Gaelic, does not really have a word for yes or no. You repeat the verb back to the person to answer the question. So there was an example I just gave you from Welsh English. Welsh English, in a similar way to Irish English, is heavily influenced by Welsh, so much so that it's not that Welsh speakers don't know yes or no. Of course they do. It's that their deepest instincts their deepest linguistic instincts run in a different path, where they're not necessarily going to say yes, they're going to say "I do" or "it does." And so you'll hear this also in Ireland. You'll hear, if somebody were to, these are all hypothetical questions, but bear with me. This is not like a recording. I didn't have time to find somebody saying exactly what I wanted to make this point, but bear with me. And I'm not hating on the Irish. I love the Irish. I'm not even going to try an accent here because it's just going to be too cringe. But if you were to say somebody in many parts of Ireland, if you were to say to somebody, "Do you love her?" "I love her." The answer might be something like, "So I do."
So I do.
I love her, so I do.
So
Where
I do.
the answer in English just kind of repeats the verb back from the question. And again, it's not that Irish people don't know the words for yes and no. Of course they do. It's not that they don't use them. Of course they do. It's that oftentimes you will not hear a yes or a no in an answer to a yes or no question because of this influence underneath from Gaelic, from the Celtic language that used to be the primary language of the Irish people and is not the primary language anymore. But the way that Irish people speak English shows this, just like the way that Welsh people speak English shows this. Is this making sense? Like
somewhat.
Somewhat.
Yeah. It's like the structure of how they speak the other language then gets imported into how they speak. Different. Yeah.
The syntax shows clear and present influences from the language that used to be spoken in the country.
Right.
And so, and Irish English has many such cases, and Irish has many examples of this. And I'm not going to go ad infinitum because you could people have written whole dissertations on this. It's Irish English is chock full of stuff that it wasn't originally English, but it became English as the Irish learned English and used it as their primary language. And this is usually what happens when, to bring it back to language death, it's what happens usually when you know, one generation does not explicitly teach a language to the next generation. That next generation hears the language at home, maybe, but doesn't really use it outside of the home, and nobody in the home bothers to speak the old language to the next generation. So the next generation is sort of exposed to it, and they're learning English from people who maybe didn't originally speak English as a native language. So they're learning kind of this foreign inflected variety of English. Then they go out and live their full lives in English and make it their own. It's not that they don't speak English, but there's this background knock-on echo effect of what was spoken before. I don't know if this is jiving with you and people. Hopefully this is making sense.
Yeah, I think so.
If I can pull out one, I know we got just a little bit of time here, so if I can pull out one.
No, we have as much time as you need,
Okay.
man. As much time as you have.
Cool.
There's no limit on this one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I try to keep it very, very tight. And
no, you don't have to.
Yeah,
we could go for like 4 hours right now.
I know, and nobody wants.
I have
to
an appointment at 4, so it's however long you can go.
You're good. So if I can pick a West Coast example, a West Coast American example, because I tried to, so I found one from Ireland/Boston, one from Chicago, and then I thought I would try to find a West Coast example, just to give a, you know, at least from an American perspective, a broad kind of, you know, swath.
Yeah. Usually we just like to pretend that the West Coast doesn't exist, but since you're here, it's fine.
Hey,
I'm just
kidding. We've given you a lot of bad things. We've also given you a lot of good things. So I mean, it's a give and take, you know.
And I will say, our liberals in New England are way better than your liberals. Your liberals are fucking crazy. Dude.
Oh, I agree. Dude, I'm a right winger who lives in Seattle. How do you think I feel?
Not good. Yeah.
Yeah, not great. Yeah.
I would take our liberals over yours every day.
I would have to agree with yes. It's just like, yeah. Your liberals at least want some kind of law and order. They don't want fires in the streets like ours do.
Yes.
Yeah.
The roots of Puritanism have some positives.
Yes, for real. Amen. As much as I have issues with the Puritans, at least they taught people to read, and at least he wouldn't tolerate fires in the streets. Yeah. So a West Coast example. So this is not my native dialect, but I mean this is an example from San Diego. I have family in San Diego, and San Diego used to be a great town. So shout out to what it used to be. It's fallen on hard times like most West Coast cities. So San Diego's the most southern of California, right? About almost as far south as you can go before you hit Mexico. So Southern California has still today a huge amount of speakers of what's called in linguistics Chicano English, quote unquote. I can send you a little.
I love that word Chicano. It's like, it's very specific to like California.
It is. It's a specifically, yeah. I mean, you can say that there's maybe some people extend Chicano English to varieties of English spoken by Tejanos in like Texas, for example. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I have no strong opinions about that. When I hear the word Chicano, I do think of SoCal specifically.
And I've met like Southern Californian Mexicans who like, when you like, if you ask them like what's your background or whatever, they identify as Chicano specifically, rather than Mexican or Hispanic or anything. They say Chicano.
Yeah, which is kind of its own thing. Yeah.
Right.
And again, I am not. So I'll do some little statements here. I'm Anglo. I don't have. I'm not a Chicano English speaker. I speak very basic Spanish. I speak what's called like restaurant Spanish for like what the gringo has to learn enough.
Una cerveza, por favor. Yeah. That's all you got to know.
Or to interact with your coworkers maybe who don't speak fluent English, or to take orders from people. It's actually, if I can tell, I do work part-time. When I'm not teaching, I do work part-time at a restaurant, and it's very funny because anytime anybody comes in who doesn't speak English, they just call me in and be like, oh yeah, you go in and talk to them. And I'm like, you realize I don't speak Russian, right?
I don't speak every language because I'm a linguist.
But they'll throw me in there. It's like, you must speak Burmese. I'm like, I do not speak Burmese. So they'll have me go in there and like interact with people in a language that I don't speak. And the hilarious thing is, I guess because I've learned a few languages, I can weirdly make it work, even though like we don't share any common vocabulary, but I can still kind of like get the order right. It's very
You
weird.
understand the methods of communicating with somebody whose language you don't speak. Like, I think there's a point there.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, but I always give my coworkers crap. I'm like, you realize I don't speak, Uzbek, right? You do know that, right? Like, do you know that? Yeah. So anyhow, I speak very bad Spanish. I mean, I can understand a lot more than I can speak, and so my Spanish is horrid. But the thing about Chicano is Chicano English is not Spanish. It is English, and people who speak Chicano English speak English usually as their native language. Now, oftentimes they have Spanish as a second language, maybe a very good second language, and in some cases,
and a lot of these people are like third, fourth generation.
fourth,
Sometimes
fifth,
the border moved over them.
The border just moved. Yeah.
Same with Texas Mexicans.
Tejanos. I have some Tejano friends in Texas. It's a similar thing, right? Like
and Tejanos in Texas, they're largely Criollos. They're largely like full European blood.
No.
Okay. Good correction.
Oftentimes there's a mestizo. They're oftentimes very mestizo.
Okay.
There's a mix. It's castizo and mestizo largely in Tejano communities. It's mixed.
I thought from like the ones that had been here for like 150 years, like the original ones, they were more likely.
At least, I mean, I have friends that are counter examples to that. I'm not saying that's not the general trend, but like it is maybe more mixed than you would realize. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's complex. That's that whole. Again, I'm a gringo, so what do I know? It's the whole, castizo mestizo sort of thing, and I'm just like, I'm not getting involved in this.
And by the way, just for people who don't know what those terms mean, a castizo is somebody who traditionally it would have been 75% Spanish, Peninsulare Spanish or Portuguese blood. Mestizo traditionally would be 50-50, but now mestizo just means like it's. They used to be official categories, like legally, for what people could run, because this was a Spanish colonial country, Mexico. And now it just means like a Criollo is like somebody who's mostly white. A Castizo is somebody who's mostly, but with some clear admixture of indigenous. And then Mestizo is like pretty much everybody. They don't really use Castizo anymore. It's more of a, but like Mestizo or Criollo is like the only ones that are still around. Criollo, not really even.
So anyhow, not Chicago, rather Chicano. There we go. We're jumping topics. Chicano English speakers are native speakers of English. This is their native language. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not fully bilingual in Spanish. That oftentimes is the case, but it doesn't have to be the case, right? Chicano English, though, regardless, is a variety of English spoken by native speakers of English, largely in SoCal. They're Americans. They've been here forever. The border oftentimes is jumped, and that's what it is, like such as history. But they are Americans. It's a variety of American English. It is English. It's not like somebody who comes here and has to learn English as a second language from Venezuela, from Guatemala. It's not the same thing at all. And Chicano speakers will know that they know the difference linguistically. They can tell, right? Just like any speaker of any dialect or language can know who's really speaks this thing natively and who is learning it, right? You can always tell. So Chicano English is interesting in that it is English. It's West Coast English, and so it participates in a lot of the American things that American English has, and specifically in West Coast, specifically in Californian English, sound changes that have happened as English has moved out west. But there's also significant substrate influence from Spanish, specifically from Mexican Spanish. Why? Because California used to be part of New Spain, then it was part of Mexico, then it was its own thing, then it's us, then it's part of America. It's a complex history of California. There is significant Spanish substrate influence in Chicano English. And I could go into, again, people have written dissertations about that. That's all very boring. I'm going to pick out one example. If you want to pull up the transcription on screen that starts with the Greek symbol theta. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. But before we get into this, I just want to some comments. I won't get to all the comments, guys, especially because the live streams have been more popular now. No need to donate. I really just ask that you like the video. That's all I want. But if you do donate even like $1, then I will get to your comment. But again, not necessary. I'm not asking for donations. Not necessary. Like and subscribe. I appreciate that. But I will if you do that. So if you really want something brought up, that's the way to do it. And I think that's pretty standard for YouTube live streams. But before we get into the thetas, the Greek stuff, I don't want to talk about this too much, but I was bringing this up because of the settlement in New Mexico and what's now New Mexico there was like, it was done by like there were specific communities. I shouldn't have even done it. We're not going to get into that, but there were specific communities up there that were settled, and there was less like Native Americans there. They
Yeah,
were
and
settled
those
in like
varieties of New Mexican
missionary
Spanish,
towns.
those varieties of New Mexican Spanish show some archaic peninsular Spanish features. Yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that shows up in some of the DNA for the older ones, but I'm sure there was some mixing, but I think they were more white. Hard to tell though. White as in like peninsulare blood. What was the thing? Yeah, Ebonics. We talked about Ebonics or African American vernacular English a little bit on the last episode that Doc Brown was on. I just want to bring that up. I answered in the comments, but people watching the replay aren't.
yeah. Everyone
see
should
that.
check out John McWhorter's book, "Talking Back, Talking Black." John McWhorter is he's a Black English speaker, and he contends it should be called Black English for various reasons that are actually kind of anti-woke and nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, check out that book. It's a good book. It's written for the general public. So,
And Ebonics, as it's now called in academic circles, AAVE, African American Vernacular English. It also happens to be an unrelated cryptocurrency, but whatever. That is like that's a real thing. Like it does have rules. That's another one of those things where people just think that it's like people speaking English wrong.
No.
That's not true.
Well,
it's
and
just
interestingly
there are
enough-
specific rules for AAVE.
And interestingly
it's
enough-
recognized in linguistics.
yeah, we probably won't have time to get to it today. The
Right.
habitual be in that you get in AAVE, like it really do be like that. That there's a decent shot that originally comes from Ireland and is then percolates into African American vernacular. So
Right.
because
Really?
the
Yeah.
Irish, because Irish speakers do the same thing with it. It does be like that. They have a habitual marker in the way that they speak Irish English, and that is also probably originally a Gaelic feature.
Right.
was
And there was lots
percolated
of interaction
Yes.
between Black Americans in the past and Irish immigrants because they were both lower class.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
it. There was even like when you see a last name of a Black person and they're a historic, like when I say African American, I bring this up all the time, but when I say African American, I mean a Black American who's descended from freed slaves,
Yes.
and that's a specific population versus more recent African and Caribbean immigrants. That's a
Right.
different thing.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of tension between the African American community and the community of more recent African and Caribbean immigrants. There's a lot of tension there. But that's who I'm talking about with African Americans.
Yeah.
But a lot of their last names come from their former slave owners. But a lot of the Irish last names that they might have, this is a real thing. I hope it's a real thing. I've read this before. That was just Black Americans, African Americans adopting the names of their friends rather than having the last name of like a slave owner.
Interesting.
Or maybe taking the name Freeman, because there weren't really a lot of Irish slave owners besides Scots Irish, because of the time that Irish immigrants came and everything.
And it really depends.
And also
where you
being
were,
poor.
because even
Catholic
that's
Irish.
the complex thing of like I'll leave the discussion of Scotch Irish in America to another day because that's going to go on and on and on.
And there was one other comment. I don't know if you know anything about this, but can the average Mexican or Chicano really trace their heritage to Aztec culture?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to speak for people that I'm not a part of.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I love them. I'm a gringo. Yo soy gringo. Yo soy el gringo loco. So that's yeah. So that's me. Yeah.
Yes. Mas cerveza, mas modelo, por favor.
The funny, what I love to do is I actually can sort of remember some Spanish pretty well, and I can get the grammar correct, but I try to purposely pronounce it as bad. So I'll like use perfect grammar, but like a very American English pronunciation, and it drives people nuts. So I'll like use the conditional, me gustaría una cerveza, por favor. And they're like, oh my gosh, you used the correct grammar, but you couldn't pronounce it right. I'm like, nah. Nah, I do this with friends just to drive them crazy.
Yes. And Ironheart's saying this thing. I don't know if this is true, but he's correct about like the Aztec culture isn't really a thing. It was like the Mexica, which were leading the Aztec, and they had a lot of influence on the places they conquered. The Tlaxcala, I think the Toltecs stayed largely independent, or was it? Yeah, the Toltecs stayed.
You know,
irrelevant.
An idea about that, yeah.
Not what we're talking about here, but it's interesting. I'm lost in all these comments. I got to stop reading all the comments because I can't do that anymore. It was fine when I had like 10 people watching, but
Yeah.
now it's way more.
I feel you.
But yes, Aztec is not a race.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Although like Central Mexicans are pretty distinct in phenotype and in a lot of ways from like the Mayans in the Yucatan Peninsula, quite a bit. Sorry, I
No, you're
lost
good.
our entire discussion by
Yeah,
going
that's
on all
fine.
these other things. People comment such interesting things. I
Oh,
love
the
having
comments are
all these
fascinating.
people that like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
stuff.
We do this for the people who watch, right? So, well, you do
Right.
this for the people who watch. You bring me on to talk about this stuff because it's people find it interesting. So I get you. Yeah, no worries.
Right. So oink.
Oink. It's
Talk
actually
about
not
oink.
oink.
I know
so
it's
this
not
is-
oink.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not oink. So in International Phonetic Alphabet, the symbol for the sound that is a Greek theta. So that's what we use there. So the tops. So I guess I'm trying to think of a way to do this without predisposing you to saying it a certain way. I'm going to type this in just the Twitter chat, just with us privately here, Sam, if I can. How would you pronounce this word in English?
Think.
Think. Okay. I would also
Heavy
say think.
th. Think.
Yeah, think. And so the way that both Sam and I would say this word is the top transcription here. Think. So pay attention to the vowel here. So the vowel sound, this weird lowercase uppercase I that makes no sense to people. That's the E. Think, E. That's the E sound. So E is not the same thing as E.
E is not the same thing as E. Great.
Well, let's hear that. So like how would you pronounce this word?
Eat.
Eat. The vowels are different. Think, eat.
Think, eat.
Think, eat. The vowels
eat.
are different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most speakers of American English would pronounce the word think like think. And I'm definitely going to pronounce it that way. That's how my native dialect does it. Speakers of Chicano English are more likely to say the second transcription here. Think, not think.
Yeah.
Think, think. I couldn't find a clip of George Lopez, but he's a good example, very funny man, and a good example of a Chicano
Love George
native
Lopez.
Chicano, English speaker. Sorry.
Oh, dale.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to find him. Danny Trejo is another example of this. Great, his tacos are cool. Check out his tacos in L.A. Danny Trejo's, machete. He's another. Another speaker of this kind of English. It's not that they're always going to say think, but they're more likely to say think than think. So this is one of many features, distinguishing features.
And I'm going to preface this before I do it, but I'm going to pull up a representation of Chicano culture, and I need to preface it. I'm only doing it. You sent me the link to the Chicano thing. I need to preface this because of what it looks like. Because Cesar Chavez, who was a socialist, he was a labor leader, for whatever reason, against everybody's recommendations, this is the way that he represented the United Farm Workers. When I see this, I just think that this is it's very mid-century German.
Yes.
But actually it's not. It's I don't know why he did this optics wise. It's absolutely insane. But it is an Aztec eagle. It's a stylized Aztec eagle with a red field, and that red field represents workers. And he chose to do this for some reason. It's a very cool flag. It looks very fascist because of our predispositions to what these things look like, but it actually is not. And it's not like Cesar Chavez was a fascist. We know that.
No,
he wasn't. But crazy that he did this. But yes, this is the United Farm Workers flag. This is not a joke. This is what they use. But yeah, I'm just leaving this on, and I needed to preface this. Sorry for interrupting you.
You're
Please
good.
continue.
You're good. Yeah.
Insane that he did this, but he really did.
So one of the features of Chicano English is that the vowel system is a little different than it is from standard American English, or even from non-Chicano Californian English.
Mm-hmm.
So you tend to get more a different vowel sound in the example.
Cesar Chavez, not Caesar. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had to do that. I interrupted you again, but I had to
You're
pronounce
good.
it right. My bad.
So think as opposed to think. So why might this be? Well, Spanish doesn't really have a vowel. It has an e vowel. And so even though Chicano English speakers are native speakers of English, because of the substrate influence from Spanish, they're more likely to raise their vowels their I vowels a little bit higher than like a native, not a native, than like an Anglo white or even African American Californian would, because there's at least historically Spanish in their community, and oftentimes still is, Chicanos oftentimes do speak Spanish as well as English. And so this is the two languages. I don't want to say they coexist pretty well, I think, is my understanding. I don't think they're at odds with one another per se. I think that most Chicanos would probably agree with me on that. I don't want to speak for the community, but I feel like, I mean, they're Americans. They speak English. They also just oftentimes speak Spanish, maybe not as natively speak Spanish, but they speak enough of it. There's enough sort of Spanish around them where that still is kind of part of the community. And so it affects the way they pronounce the word think. Why do I pull out the word think? Because hilariously, the influence of Chicano English also seems to have influence on non-Chicanos in California, specifically on Anglos in California.
Oh, cool.
This is the funky thing that can happen. So wherein you have an ethnic variety of English then starts influencing the dominant culture's variety of English. That can also sometimes happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen. The example I'm going to bring up here, because I'm a proud millennial and I'm a huge fan of the band, is Blink-182, and the way that Tom DeLonge from Blink-182 pronounces the word think.
It's funny because somebody brought up Pink Floyd in the chat. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I have that clip ready. Tom DeLonge,
Okay.
Blink-182. Lots of millennials here. The majority, the largest demographic for Illegitimate Scholar is people in their 30s. So millennials.
That's me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone here remembers the great album Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and the great song First Date by Blink-182, it's a song about being nervous about a first date. If you want to play this clip, pay attention to the way that Tom DeLonge says the word think.
Scared of what you think. You make me nervous, so I'm really scared of what you think.
See, I always thought that was just him doing the pop punk voice.
It could be. But the thing is if you listen,
it's like very whiny. It's like Cartman.
But if you listen to him talk, like he's been on Joe Rogan talking about like aliens and shit. I couldn't find a clip of him saying a word with E in it, it's specifically in the way he says the word think. But this song, yes, okay, fine, might be pop punk. He's definitely playing it up. When he sings, he sounds a little different than when he talks.
Right, everybody does.
But it's
like a different part of your brain, right?
He's accentuating something that already exists. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's accentuating something that already exists. He's from San Diego. Shout out to San Diego. Still love San Diego. May you get better leadership soon.
And SoCal is where pop punk is from.
It's from, yes.
Awesome.
So,
okay.
Maybe
that's why I associate it with pop punk, because like all these pop punk bands and alternative bands are from Southern California.
A lot of them, and even so much so that like even pop punk bands that aren't from SoCal will start sounding like they're from SoCal when they're singing their music. An example is Good Charlotte. They're from Baltimore, and they do have a little bit of the Baltimore in some of their pronunciation in some of their stuff because they're big about Baltimore. But at the same time, when I was listening to Good Charlotte the other day, I was like, goodness gracious, they sound a lot like California, because that's what the pop punk sound comes out of Southern California. So everyone's kind of playing with this earlier way of pronouncing. Okay, fine. Good asterisk to this point. Yes, they're singing, they're performing, they're doing something little different than when they would normally talk. Yes, but if you listen to the way that Tom DeLonge talks, he does have, his vowels are notably different. And he is, I believe, of Dutch and English ancestry. He is not Chicano. I don't think he speaks Spanish, at least not natively, but he's from SoCal. And so it's this interesting thing where it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. It's hard to know how much of this E pronunciation is Chicanos influencing non-Chicanos and vice versa, but it's kind of all gets mixed into this the sort of the soup, the pot of Southern Californian English and the way that different communities in SoCal speak English. And this level of complexity and like variability, by the way, is not just a SoCal thing. Anywhere you have anybody speaking any language, you're going to have this level of sociolinguistic like complexity.
Right.
And it's a good point too here about Vingle. Yes, the pop punk pronunciation, the punk pronunciation in general is heavily influenced by England because of sort of the transatlantic punk cross-pollination. Yes.
Yeah.
But
And then pop punk is SoCal.
Yes,
Obviously,
this
it
is
has
SoCal.
more roots in punk, but it
Yeah.
also has like it's mainly SoCal. Yeah, that I'm glad you commented that, Vingle, because that's cool. That's very cool. And you can hear that in a lot of American punk bands, real punk, not that there's anything wrong with pop punk. Obviously,
Right.
I'm a millennial too. I love pop punk, but
Yeah.
pop punk and punk are distinct genres. They both have punk in the name, but they're their own things.
Yeah, I mean, and you can look at bands too, like non-punk bands. If you want to think of it, another good, very millennial example is the Killers. The Killers sound very British, incredibly British in the way
They do.
They really do, and they're actually. I have a good friend from England, and he always points this out: is that they're actually basically a British band. They're actually because they're very very popular. They're still very very popular in England in a way that they're not so much in America. I mean, they're still popular here, but not like in England. Like the British.
Yeah, they're more like a
really
wedding song band in America now.
Yeah, and it's because they're like the Killers style was always more of like a British, like quasi British new wave inspired kind of, but also rock kind of music, and so they were clearly drawing from British sources in the sound, but also that comes your sound of your band also has to do with your pronunciation. So yes,
Right.
but yeah. Anyhow, this think.
And you also hear this. Sorry to interrupt again,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you also hear this in like there's a lot of well, number one, American folk in general is heavily influenced by Irish folk music in a lot of ways, and then but you also have American Celtic bands like across multiple genres, like traditional Celtic as well as like something like the Dropkick Murphys or the Flogging Molly, and they have a lot of influences from Ireland, even though they're explicitly American.
Yeah,
And
well, I mean,
heavily Boston Irish as well.
right. I mean, you can think about people too, like Hozier, right? Like, or however you say his name in Irish English. Yeah, Hozier. Like he like is explicitly going for an American sound, but he is himself very Irish at the same time.
My God, I didn't know Hozier was Irish.
Yeah, he's
Holy
Irish. It
crap.
sounded- yeah.
I thought he was American.
No, right? Because
What?
so that's an example of an Irishman who's explicitly going for a very American sound. I didn't know.
I
he was
wish I could
Irish
play
either.
more songs. Like, but that's more dangerous on YouTube than playing
Yeah.
videos, is playing songs. But like, I 100% thought that
I
Hozier was
only
American.
Recently,
That's
learned that
crazy.
He was Irish. So yeah, I mean, I also he hides it. Well, I don't think he's trying to hide it, but
No, yeah.
he's adhering to the genre constraints in terms of his pronunciation, and so he's playing down some of I think his native Irish tendencies to sound more American because the type of music he's making sounds more American. But then again,
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I never even thought
Yeah.
that. That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Am I crazy, chat? Did anyone else know that Hozier was freaking Irish? I like him even more now. He's got
Can I-
great songs.
Can I
but
give one more real life anecdote example from this? I've been
you can
thinking
give
about this a lot.
75 more.
Okay.
You can talk forever.
So
This
I
is your
work
soapbox.
when I'm not teaching online, which is a part-time gig, because I used to have full-time academic employment. I don't have it anymore because academia is dying. But I do work part-time at just a regular job. I work in a restaurant, and I work in Seattle, and we're a very diverse city. We have a lot of people from all over who are either come from all over or are born here, but have like parents who are from. And it's not just like, oh, my parents are Cambodian. It could be like my parents are Cambodian and like Latino or something. Like it's like this interesting admixture of people here.
Yeah.
I have a coworker who was born in Thailand to Cambodian parents,
Mm-hmm.
and then came, I believe, as like I don't know if they're refugees or whatever it was.
Cambodia is like Thailand's Mexico, so yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, to America, and so she has spent most of her life in America, and she
Mhm.
speaks fluent Cambodian and American English. Her husband is African American.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that she speaks English, it threw me for a loop until I realized who her husband. I met her husband. I was like, oh, she basically speaks Black English, but she's a short Cambodian looking person, and it's you're like I couldn't tell. I was like, is this what's going on here? I don't think she's trying to be culturally insensitive, right? You just didn't know what to do with this. I was like, for me as somebody who's obsessed with language, I'm like instantly noticing. I'm like, why does she quote unquote sound African American? I was like, I couldn't place this. Then I met her husband, who was very nice. I was like, oh, the kind of English she speaks at home is Black English because that's her husband. And so I was like, it makes sense. But I cannot help but find it just in the best of ways. Like I find it hilarious in a great way. I'm like, this is just such an interesting thing about how languages bump up against each other, or in this case, different dialects of English. You have somebody who comes here from Cambodia and essentially learns Black English because that's the community she's interacting with. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, but it's very interesting.
There's a Filipino comedian, but he's actually half Filipino. Joe Coy. Yes. Joe Coy. Love Joe Coy.
Go get extra Joe Coy. Yeah, I know Joe Coy.
Yeah. So I didn't know this. I thought both of his parents, like he does look half white when you like think about it. But like when I didn't know, his mom is the white one. And he had always talked about his mom. And like I assumed that his mother was Filipino because he's always talking about his mom's accent. His mom is a white lady.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. He brought it up in one of his specials. His
funny.
mom is a white lady who grew up around Filipinos, has a Filipino accent, cooks Filipino food, culturally Filipino, white lady, 100% white. And like, so he's half white. His dad, obviously, she grows up in a Filipino community, marries a Filipino guy. His dad is Filipino. His mom's white, but like culturally Filipino. I'm going to share this if I could. This is a video. This kid right here, this white kid, grew up in Singapore. So Singapore is a country that is mixed racially.
He's gonna speak Singlish probably.
Yes, he's gonna speak Singlish. So we're just gonna play this. So Singapore is a country that's mostly Chinese ethnically, but it's its own thing. Very interesting country, gorgeous country, very legalistic, very. They call it a fine city because you get fined for everything. Very, if you show up with drugs there, they will execute you, possibly, or throw you in a terrible prison for 30 years. But we're just going to listen to this white kid talk in his native accent.
White boy Singlish. So Tyler, how long have you lived in Singapore?
Singapore, 9 years already.
9 years, and then before that?
2 years in China, then some more, got 5 years in the States.
5 years in the States. Isn't that crazy hearing
It's amazing.
that? These two American Asians listening to him talk are like losing their minds.
Wow. Okay, did people treat you any differently? Like, you know, wherever you went, because you spoke differently?
Of course. In local schools, only blonde person, hard to do anything. Always stand out one. China, same thing. They call me Jingfa.
Jingfa, golden hair.
Golden hair.
Golden hair. Oh man, I want that nickname. That's sick. That is sick. Yeah.
Can you speak Mandarin?
也可以.
Do you still use it these days to get stuff?
当然.
No, ooh, not bad.
So Tyler, if you ever go to a hawker center, I'm sure you speak in your Winglish. Are they ever surprised?
Aksa mai hiam. I'm more very power.
Very power. Okay. Yeah. I just want to share that. I thought that was cool. You guys like that in the comments?
You'll have to share that with me. Send me that link. Yeah, that's
I will. I'll send it to you right now.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, really cool. We love cultural sharing here on the Illegitimate Scholar podcast. That's what we do.
Yes, English is fascinating. English is really fascinating. Yeah, a friend of mine who is bilingual in he's from Ohio, but he's bilingual in Mandarin and English. He spent time in he's lived I think a little bit in Singapore, and he was telling me about it. And it was that's the first time I encountered this kind of thing. I was like, what? He's like, oh yeah, Singlish is a whole thing. It's just like this whole contact variety of English that isn't really a Creole language, but it has a lot of influence from Chinese on the way that they pronounce it, on the grammar and everything. So yeah. Anywho, yeah. So, but yeah, Tom DeLonge does appear. I mean, Southern Californian English, even if you're not Chicano, there might be some. I think it's hard to prove, but I think it's safe to say that if you have, Chicano communities living next to Anglo communities, living next to African American communities, you're probably going to have some crossover, right? You're probably going to have some bleed over. That's just pretty normal. And so yeah, I mean, maybe Tom DeLonge is just playing this up for the pop punk vibes, but I don't know. I like to
Yeah.
I think there's something more going on here, right?
No, I wasn't saying that it wasn't like from his place. I was just like, I think that after seeing that, like my perspective is that it's most likely that that was adopted into pop punk from SoCal. Like
yeah. And SoCal itself is, I guess what I'm trying to say, is more of a soup than I think. It's less homogenous than people realize. Californian English is more differentiated based on your community than I think a lot of people are willing to kind of admit, and or maybe just even be more. People aren't usually aware of this stuff, right? Because most people, like I say, are not like me. They're not autistically listening to how somebody's pronouncing something. They're just not. They're living their lives being normal people, which is good. I like normal people, but you do need some weirdos like me who are like breaking down little pronunciations, because it does. It's not just interesting in and of itself, right? If I could philosophize for 2 seconds, it shows you just how complex any human language is, and languages are spoken by groups of people, and groups of people interact with other groups of people, and the language changes along with this. And so anyhow,
and at the end of the day, it's like, with culture, we're talking about, like, when we talk about a culture, we're talking about who some group of people or individuals have decided is a culture.
Right.
But really nobody, while culture is by definition shared, no individual has the same culture as another individual, because you have this hugely factored group of influences. Like, there's nobody else that is, I'm a special snowflake. There's nobody else like me that's even though it's very common for people from New England to be Irish or Irish Italian or Italian or English, that's very common, but there's no one that has the exact mix of, like, oh, I'm 3/4 Irish, a quarter Hungarian from New England, my grandfather like emigrated to Philadelphia. Like, nobody has the same influences. So there really is no, like, any culture that you designate as a culture is this is a human created, like, culture itself. Deciding that something is a culture is a social construct. It is a culturally determined idea that this is a culture,
which doesn't mean that it's not real. It is real.
No,
it's just real because enough people agree that it's real. And,
right. But there's always variation within it.
Oh, of course.
And there's always other influences and other cultures, and it's just what you prioritize and what you designate. Yeah.
I mean, so I've talked a little bit about dialects here, you know, and if we want to go even more down to the finer level, I mean, every single human has their own idiolect, which is the way that they speak their language or languages. So, like, even within one family, amongst siblings, even amongst twins, you'll get differences in the way they talk to each other or talk in general. So there's always, this is why language is endlessly fascinating, because in some ways it is individuated. It is you are just you, but you are you speaking not with yourself. You're speaking with other people usually. And so then that's going to, and, you know, the way that your parents speak influences you, but not just your parents, it's your friends. And
to put a specific example on that, like, if you have two twins and one of them plays lacrosse and one of them plays basketball, the kid that plays lacrosse, and I'm bringing up lacrosse, I'm showing my
I played
Northeastern. Oh, you did?
I still use as a metaphor, oh, we're playing man down today, and nobody knows what I mean.
Oh, I know what you mean.
I know what you mean. You play hockey or you play lacrosse, you know what I mean? We're playing man down today, and people are like, what's that mean? Yeah, anyhow.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Lacrosse is very common in the Northeast because it's a Haudenosaunee Iroquois game. So it's very common in the Northeast. It's associated with rich white boys, which is also a thing that's associated with the Northeast. But, like, if you have two twins, one of them goes to play basketball, one of them plays lacrosse, they're going to have different cultural influences.
Oh, for sure.
Because the one that plays basketball is going to be hanging out with more black people, most likely.
Yeah.
And the one that plays lacrosse is going to be hanging out with mostly white and different upper class people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you again.
No,
I
you're
wanted to
good.
get that out. But
no, it's a good point. Yeah.
Whenever you're at a stopping point, I have another clip to share that someone brought up in the comments.
Yeah, show a clip.
All right. We're gonna do this. My white Jamaican dad. This is yeah.
Today I'm going to show you. What is your name?
What kind of question you ask me? You don't know my name long time already. We can't put my name on the internet, girl. What's wrong with you?
Where are you from?
I come from Jamaica. We come from the western part of Jamaica. We can't really tell you where we come from down there though, because we don't know where we come from.
What kind of food do you like to eat?
But I like all kind of food. Anything they make in Jamaica, I like ackee and saltfish, a piece of fried pork in it.
A good piece of fried pork in it. I can't even do it. I can't do the
Yeah.
accent. Isn't that so cool?
Well, and that's not, he's not even actually speaking. That's not just accented English. He's speaking, he's flipping into patois at moments
Yeah,
there. So that's
he
a
is.
Creole language happening there, by the way, to link it back to what we talked about last time. Yeah. Yeah. You notice that oftentimes he's using me instead of I. Me.
Yes.
Yeah, that is patois. That is
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm going to emphasize this. It doesn't mean they're dumb. It's just how the language was imported. It's perceived that way. And it might be evidence of that if they're just a native English speaker that's just doesn't know how to speak their dialect. But these are real dialects, real Creole languages.
Yeah.
There are rules to this, which is why there are rules to Ebonics or African American vernacular English.
Well,
it's
and
not
those
like
rules,
they're
and those
speaking randomly.
rules- Yeah, and those
Right.
rules we call grammar or syntax, right? So
Right.
yeah, those rules are quite complex. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. John McWhorter's book, Talking Back, Talking Black, shows you just how complex African American vernacular English is in the way that it does, like verbs, like that. It's become something of a meme, but that it really do be like that. That's actually a whole complex thing that you have to do a certain way. And I'm a white person, so I cannot do it. I think it's cool, but I'm never going to attempt to do that because it's like I wasn't raised around that kind of English. I don't know how to use the habitual be because I'm not in American context. I'm white, but I'm not, neither am I black nor am I Irish from Ireland. The Irish can do this because that's a thing in Irish English, and obviously it's a thing in African American vernacular English as well, but not in my dialect. So I just don't do that. I'm not gonna, I can recognize it as different, but it's not how I speak English.
You just reminded me. I keep talking about whatever. I think I've interrupted you from something. I have something to share with you that I think is going to be really I gotta find it for a moment.
I can rap for a few seconds about
please and I won't excitedly like stop you in a point, which I hate doing, but sometimes I have to.
I got about 30 more minutes, so I can fill the space here with stuff.
Sweet. And I'm gonna find what I'm talking about. It's very relevant. You guys are gonna love this, but it's somebody, I'm just gonna say it's somebody trying to talk AAV and not knowing what that means. It's the most cringeworthy thing, but I'm going to find it.
Yeah. All right. I'll fill the space, as they say in radio. Fill the space. It's interesting because all of my multilingualism, all of my interest in languages comes much later in life. I was always interested in language, but never really had an opportunity to learn any other foreign languages until I really hit about middle school. So I'm always kind of playing catch up. But it is interesting thinking back because my dad and my grandparents, with whom I spent a lot of time growing up, were not from Seattle. They're from Texas. They're from Dallas. And so and that's not like a different language, but it's definitely a different dialect of English. And so to this day, like the only other dialect, quote unquote, of English that I can convincingly do, I can sound like I'm from North Texas if I need to. And it's interesting because I did my doctorate in Texas. And so we were driving around to these small towns recording Texas German, right? Because you're like, hey, let's record this language before it dies. And it's interesting because we would stop in these small diners or barbecue joints because Texas, right? Best barbecue on the planet. Fight me. I don't care. It's the best. And it was
I spent half my life in North Carolina. You can eat it, Orange Man.
I know. I will fight you
continue.
on that. Anyhow, so I would go to these small, like very small town barbecue joints because we're like eating before we drive back to, again, most people I think can figure out where I got my PhD. I won't say it, but you can figure it out. It's a place where it's all right. And so we were like, we'd stop and get some food right before the 3-hour drive back. And I would run my own sociolinguistic experiment in the moment. I would order my food with not like a comically strong Texas accent, but just a little bit. I would change the way I was pronouncing things, maybe change some of my word choice, and just become a little bit more Texan. And I got better service because of it. And my co-graduate students were looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, like half my family's from Texas. I know how to talk this way. I don't normally do it because I was raised in Seattle, but I spent a lot of weekends going to my grandparents where it was like a small little Texan. It was a small bit of Texas in the middle of the Pacific Northwest, right? The instant I came into their house and spent time with them, I mean, they as a child, I recognized they spoke different, right? And I knew that intuitively that they spoke different. And so, yeah, anyhow, that's just an anecdote from my life. Not like groundbreaking, but yeah, I mean, because when I would switch into just a little bit more Texas inflected speech in these small Texas towns, people recognize, I don't even think they understood what I was doing. I think it was all subconscious because I wasn't overplaying it. They sort of intuitively grasped that this person talks more like me. Therefore, there's a sense of friendliness. There's a sense of breaking down barriers.
Right.
And I guess what I'm trying to say here is this
when
is
it's relatable.
It's
right?
relatable.
Yeah.
And this is, I guess, ultimately a spiel about why it's good to step outside of your linguistic comfort zone, whether that's just learning more about the way somebody in a different community speaks your language, or maybe just learning a different language in general. It allows you to kind of step outside of your zone and then look back at your zone. And I'm certain as an anthropologist, you'd agree that that's an important thing. You learn to actually value your own culture more when you learn about other cultures.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's like my main shtick is like, you know, I love other cultures. Some people on Twitter, like I got unfollowed the other day because I said that I liked black people. By the way, if you're going to unfollow me because I'm not racist, unfollow me, unsubscribe.
Same here, by the way.
Whatever,
Same with
dude.
me. I mean,
I'm not racist. I don't know how you could think I am doing a cultural anthropology podcast. I don't know why, but like, for the love of God, I'm not.
Can I be edgy for 2 seconds?
Go for it.
Race is a science cucked category anyhow. It's an Enlightenment category. Reject that shit. The Enlightenment was stupid. So yeah.
The Enlightenment, yeah. Early modern period destroyed us.
Culture is very real, but race is fake. But culture is real. Culture is real, but what is race? I don't even know. Again, that's a whole topic.
Well, there's real things in race, but it's like culture, it's like a spectrum.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's like there's no like you can't hard define a race. It's too broad, and usually there's a lot of mixing. There's some places where it's a lot more well defined. Like in Australia, like the Australian Aboriginals are very well defined because of like a lack of mixing. But like, if you ask people where white people stop, you're going to get different answers. Like, is Armenia white? Is Turkey white? What about Uzbekistan? Like, where does it end? It's like, it's somewhere. And a lot of Europeans would say Armenians aren't white, but Armenians in America are white, and somehow Turks aren't white, even though they're like closer to Indo-European and Aryan than Armenia. It's wild.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Really stupid. But this is actually perfect that you bring that up, because like people know when you're being fake, if you're like trying to imitate their culture. If you actually understand it and you're involved with it in a real way, then they appreciate it. But this is something that comes from a guy, Turkey Tom, who is a drama YouTuber. He's this Zoomer kid, Never Goon. He's like 22 years old, but this is his video on Lily Jean, who is ridiculous. I'm not going to say too much because they're very litigious. But she's kind of like, it seems like she kind of faked a following and had all these fake accounts. So we're going to see what an account that I'm going to call a fake account. I don't know if it's Lily Jean. You're going to see why I call it a fake account unequivocally here, but I don't know who's running it. It seems that it's like, you know, it is, it seems like it's a fake, like, it seems like she made it, but like, just listen to this. Listen to this.
Yeah.
This is somebody who is trying to fake AAVE in the worst way possible. And it's not her talking, it's like her writing. But it's much worse than you think it's going to be, combined with the picture, which you might recognize. And you would almost think that somebody was doing a joke with this, but based on all the other information surrounding her, that is not the case. This is real, it's real that somebody did this.
Lily needed to make sure her page appeared very active, which explains the presence of multiple fan pages and friends who would frequently interact with her Instagram account. Notably, all of these friends were individuals belonging to marginalized groups like a Muslim, a trans person, a gay man, and a black woman. This isn't to say members of these groups don't make social media accounts.
A black woman named Shaniqua.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a real name. It is a real name. It's also probably the name you would pick if you had only a stereotypical understanding of black people.
Obviously, but it seemed to be the case that every single follower of hers was some exaggerated stereotype of one of these groups. The account of one of her supposed...
That's the picture. That's the picture.
This is painful.
That is the picture, by the way.
It's painful.
Yeah, Maul Goodman. I think a lot of Turks DNA wise are basically Greek. They're and there's not a lot of Turkic blood, just like there's not a lot of Magyar blood in Hungarians. There's not a lot of Turkic blood in
Never
Turks.
confuse genes for language. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Big mistake. Anthropology used to do that too much, but yes. So Shaniqua.
Black female fans is particularly interesting, as a picture she tries to pass off as herself is from the well-known internet meme, "I'm a strong, independent black woman who don't need no man." In one post, Shaniqua says, "I was so gosh mad because beauty is inside and not outside, and here I am showing myself to use people, and what happened? I gets called fat. Black snot rag, N-word factory. Well, I was so pizzled."
I was so pizzled. This is some of the most racist shit I've ever seen in my life.
This is very, if I'm going to say, this is very minstrel show adjacent kind of levels of cultural imitation here.
It is.
Yeah.
And anybody can recognize this isn't real. Like, and by the way, like I should say, I understand if people are racist. Like, it's fine if you're racist. Just don't think I need to be. Like, if you want to be racist, as long as you're not like promoting violence, like you're cool. It's fine. Just like I talk to Hindu nationals and Zionists too. But like, regardless, pizzled.
But it actually has not bad ending. It was obvious to onlookers that
it actually has not bad ending. That's just somebody like speaking grammatically incorrect. Nobody speaks that way when they're talking African American vernacular English.
That's not how it works. Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And you can recognize this. A guy like you as a linguist, you recognize it immediately as not being right. Like me as a cultural anthropology guy, I recognize it. I can't pinpoint it as well as you. But yeah.
Nobody actually speaks like Shaniqua spoke here.
And even Turkey Tom, the 22-year-old, is like, nobody actually speaks like this, which is the best way to put it, because AAV is a real thing. This is what it looks like when you think that black people just speak English badly.
Yeah.
Right?
I would recommend you do actually an episode on AAVE. The issue is that I'm not a speaker of it, so I am not the person for you. If you can find somebody who's a native speaker, I would recommend. It's fascinating and cool, but again, just because I'm a linguist doesn't mean I speak all languages. I do not speak it, but it's so interesting. I would recommend doing something with it. It's really a fascinating form of and distinctly American form of English, right? It's very American. It's a certain kind of American. It's African American, but it is an American thing. And if you live in America, or if you're interested in America, it's something that's cool to know about, because it's something that our country has that is very unique, and I would say beautiful and cool and fascinating, and it's complex, and all the other things that every language variety has. So yeah, and
it's like I've seen posts like right-wing people, not that I'm not right-wing. I mean, I'm socially conservative. I am. But I've seen like people complaining about textbooks having, and these are mostly college textbooks. I think it also exists in like high school textbooks, but they're like, oh my God, they're so woke. They're teaching this bad English. It's like, dude, that's not what it is. Like, that's just not what it is. Like, you can be racist, but be accurate. Okay. Because it's a thing. This has become a theme on this channel. Like, be more creative with your racism, like get it right. And I think the first time it came up where I started like talking about it a lot was when I was watching a video and there was a Native American person talking about how they had been called a prairie N-word, but they were like an Eastern Woodlands Native American. I'm like, that's not even correct, bro. It's not creative. It's not correct. Like, come up with something new and don't just pick a word and add it on to a hard R, bro. Like, if you're going to be racist, don't be dumb at the same time. And like, read a book, read an ethnography. Maybe you read enough of them, you won't be racist anymore, and you'll understand we're all different for different reasons. I don't know. I don't care. You want to be racist, that's fine. Don't put it on me. And as long as you're not talking about violence, you and I are cool. But regardless, and I will lose any followers that are mad at me because I'm not racist. This is a question that I'll ask you. Can we just agree that
Vingle, the axe pronunciation is actually really old?
I thought it would be.
And actually, there's always been dialects of English that have pronounced it as axe instead of ask. It's called metathesis. It's a pretty normal thing. There's always been variation on that word in English. So, yeah.
And I should also say, like, I'm not trying to be racist. If you're just talking, like, when I'm talking about racist, I'm talking about people that identify as racist.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about like me seeing you say something and me then thinking like, oh, that's a racist thing that they're saying. Like that's not what I'm describing.
You know, I think what you're maybe saying is that racist becomes its own identity, which is really weird, by the way.
Right.
It's
right.
it's like an identity based on hating other identities, and you're like, okay, but there's no positive. It's only a negative description. You're like, all right, do you have anything else? Yeah.
You're never going to get in trouble or have me be mad at you if you're asking frank and questions from an honest place. When I'm talking about racist, I'm talking about like people whose personality is being a racist, who self-identify as racist. And there are a lot of them on Twitter, and I'm mutuals with some of them. I don't interact with that side of it. And as long as they don't say anything like promoting violence or overt dehumanization is usually the rule that I have, then whatever, it's fine. It's like, it's fine. It's not how I think, but there's plenty of other things that I look past as well, because you have to when you're doing cultural anthropology, because people think so differently. And if you applied like a Western framework of thinking to like even East Asia, you would condemn every single person that lives there.
Exactly.
It's just not reasonable.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I vibe with you on that. Like, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I have there's so many more interesting things to think about than like over parsing which groups I like and don't like. It just gets endlessly like, it's a waste of time for me.
And it also has very little actual influence on your interactions with people. Like,
exactly.
You can recognize the behavior of a specific group in general, but when you're and you can be cautious of a specific group for that reason, whether that reason be race, religion, like any type of thing that you would be like, oh, these people generally think this way. But once you meet somebody and talk to them, they're now an individual who may or may not be part of any sort of group. But like, even if 95% of a group has a certain trait, why would you condemn the 5% that don't if you don't like that trait?
Right.
That's where I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like,
I feel you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry,
you got more? I forget
this
where.
Is just this is so ridiculous. This feels like something from a South Park episode. To bring it back to South Park, this feels.
What does?
This can't. This fake AVE here. Like, it's just. This couldn't. I don't know why this chick or whoever it was passing this off as like thought that's was going to be authentic. I guess is just very poorly done. But alas.
Yeah. Here's something I want to ask the chat, actually. I know where a few people are from, but can everybody tell me, like, in the comments, and if you're watching this not live, let me know in the comments on the actual video, where are you guys from? Because I know we got a Turkish guy in the chat who's been showing up recently. Thanks so much. Our people fought, and by our people, I mean Hungarians, fought Turks forever. We don't have to do that anymore,
so
bro.
I also got some of that going, but
it's 2024. Yeah,
we don't have to... Yeah.
We don't have to do that fighting anymore. I'm glad that we can be friends on the internet. But yeah, tell me where you're from. No. Vingel says no. Vingel, you're from one of the Norse countries, right? We got South Africa. That's sick. We're brothers, really. Just below the Poles, I'd say. The Poles are my brothers first. Vingel, oh my gosh. Vingel did not say no. He sent a Norwegian flag, which came up.
Country code.
Yeah. So we got Norway, we got Iceland. Yes, I actually know. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but this is one of the guys I was saying earlier that I was supposed to go to Norway with. And I might go to Norway. No, I'm sorry. I was supposed to go to Norway with him and some other guys. Fjolnir. Yes, Fjolnir. I was supposed to go. That was when I got super sick. I was bedridden for a week, the sickest I've been in a very long time, and I couldn't go. So Norway, South Africa, the Turkish, from Turkey. Grew up in Chicagoland, born in Nori Targ. What is that? Alberta, our favorite type of Canadian. Welcome.
Yes, Alberta beef.
Yeah, Vingel says impressive pronunciation by the guest. Yes, he is a linguist. So that makes sense. Also, you worked with the Sami, so you have experience with...
I didn't work with Sami. I worked with historical documents pertaining to the Sami. So,
got it.
Yeah, I don't...
Got it.
I've worked with the Sami scholar, but we weren't speaking in Sami. I don't speak Sami. We were speaking English and Norwegian, so... I do not speak Sami. It's a cool language. I don't have time to learn that number of cases. It's crazy hard.
That's so funny that it showed up as no on my StreamYard. Did I miss anybody? But yeah, we got a lot of countries, man. I think the Americans are just like, yeah, I'm American. I'm not sending anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got like 5 countries represented just in the comments.
Well, some of us come from the Democratic People's Republic of Chaz Chop. So
yeah, if you go back to the first time that Doc Brown was on, it'll be in the lives somewhere. He infiltrated the Chaz/Chop, which was the little autonomous zone that they set up over there in commie Seattle for a few days, and then tragically, unfortunately, it only took them like 3 days to end the life of a black teenager.
Yep. People died.
Apparently, copping is hard.
Yeah.
Oh, Southern Poland. Okay, sick. Oh, Ironheart, I remember that because I was bringing up the Hungarian-Polish Friendship Day. Yeah, Hungarians and Poles, like that. Also, side note, there are 2 like fathers of the American cavalry. One of them is Polish and one of them is Hungarian, which is 2 countries that had significant cavalry traditions. Both of them having hussars.
Very cool.
I
Yeah,
believe that
hussars. Yeah,
hussars. I like famous more for being Polish, but I think originally they do come from a Hungarian unit, which is a sticking point for me, but that's okay. Saved Europe from the horde.
Yes.
Yeah, saved Europe from and I can't pronounce his name. Oh, actually, can you pronounce the Turkish guy's name?
I don't do Turkish, sorry.
Got it.
I can speak some Turkish German, which is a joke that's also kind of true. But that's a whole other topic for another day. Talking about contact variety, yeah. Turkish German is fascinating. But yeah, that we don't have time for that today. Yeah. The way that people in Germany speak German who have Turkish background is very different and interesting, fascinating. Yeah, but if you don't speak German, I'd have to translate everything. It'd just take forever because a lot of it assumes a knowledge of German. So yeah.
Gosh, I'm so happy we have all these different countries represented in the chat, guys. That's what it's all about. Thank you so much for everybody coming. I know you're about to have to go, so
I got to go.
Anything else? What else do we have?
Yeah.
Or do you have to go now?
I got a few minutes here. I'll have to teach at some point here. Yeah.
I'll let you talk till the end about whatever you want.
Thanks thanks to you and to everyone. Yeah, German Turks are their own variety of it's its own culture. It's neither German nor Turkish. It's its own thing. They're it's interesting. I'll say, good food. Döner, Döner kebab. Thanks for having me back on. Obviously, I enjoy being here and enjoy talking about this in a friendly environment. Most people do not want to hear me, go on and on and on about what Tom DeLonge has to do with language contact. But it's fascinating because languages. I think I've said something like this before, so I'll just say something like this again. Language is so fundamental to being a human. We use it every day of our lives. Even if we're hard of hearing, we sign every day of our lives. We write something down every day of our lives. If we're in a literate society, which is most of us, language is so fundamental to being ourselves and to being ourselves within a culture and that very complex interaction between the two. And if you're multilingual, I think a lot of the people in the viewership here you understand this in a way that maybe some of the monolingual Americans don't, that like really the interplay between language is very fascinating. It's very complex. And so, I guess I would, if I have some sort of call to action, not that there needs to be, I'd say, just learn, whether or not you go learn another language, learn about somebody who speaks differently than you, whether that's a completely different language or just a different dialect down the street. Like there's just, it does give you a perspective on the way you speak. And I think that gives you a perspective on yourself, which is valuable. And it's not that it needs to always be humbling. Oftentimes it points out the good things about your language or your culture or your dialect or whatever we're talking about, right? Like it doesn't always need to be this stupid woke shit of like, I acknowledge my historical guilt and bullshit like that. It's just, I acknowledge my historical place, that I come out of a place, an interplay of cultures have given birth to me in my current place. And how do I interact with people of same and different cultures? So it doesn't need to be woke. It can be what you're supposed to do, which is just be, a introspective, well thought person, right? Like that's just part of it. So,
and that you have summed up my channel, right? Because this is a cultural anthropology channel that, number one, does not have hatred for Western culture, But what's rare to have in conjunction with that does not have hatred for other cultures as well. That's not what we do here. It's like, we can appreciate, we don't have to be like handcuffed by all of these like modern Western ideas that seek to place Western culture below other cultures. It's everything's on the same level. We're going to compare them. We're going to talk about our differences. We're going to very literally celebrate diversity.
Yeah.
Because like our diversity of culture is what makes culture a thing. Yeah. And it can just be a thing. It doesn't have to be a value on it. And I think that's why, I think that's why we have such a diverse audience here, which I'm so grateful for. I'm grateful for everybody that came here to listen. I'm grateful for everybody that comes every day. And please, Patreon's $2 a month for now until it goes up to $5. Sign up for that. And check out Axios Fitness if you want to, like it. I think it's $50 initial, $25 every month after that. Well worth it. Planned out, personalized workouts. Is very helpful to me, and those are great. Those links are down below. And thank you so much for coming, Ironheart. I did, and the last thing, I did see your comment. I did not know this. Where's your comment now? It disappeared. It was something about Husaria. Yeah, here we go. In Eastern Europe, the terms Husaria, winged hussars, and hussar are two separate terms. And in Hungarian, there's a Z after the S. That's a Hungarian letter. I have to learn Hungarian, and I can get Hungarian citizenship, even without living there. So I got to get on that.
Too bad it's one of the hardest languages to learn.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Freaking Asian language. Like I have to be. No, it is beautiful. It is beautiful. But for the love of God, it's very hard for an English speaker to learn. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming everybody. And it's okay if you're racist, but I'm not. And I hope that it's okay with you that I'm not racist. That's fine. Can we agree on that? I know that people in the comments, most of them aren't, but I know that's a thing. That's just a cultural difference. Like, many people are racist. Everybody in Japan's racist. Everybody in East Asia is. But that's my rant. And this is why there was a day, and I'm very proud of this, that I was called a hard R lover and a mid-century German. And I am, I guess you could say I'm a hard R lover in the sense that I like black people. I don't like black people above white people, but I do like black people. I like all kinds of people. But yes, hard R lover and a Yahtzee.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
but you
that's
must be
what
doing
you get
something
here.
right if you're pissing off both those people. You must be doing something right if you're getting called both those things. Right?
That's what I said. I'm getting like far right racist people calling me a hard R lover, like calling me a race traitor. It's actually not the first time I've been called that as well, which is like, it's a very specific insult. And then from the far left, I like, if somebody calls me a racist because of some of the stuff I post that's like insensitive to other cultures, I at least understand that. But like a Nazi, why? How? What the hell did I like? How?
They don't.
I know
like
that term has lost
all
meaning.
It's a friend-enemy distinction term at this point. It just means somebody I don't like. Yeah.
I started talking to that person because someone else forwarded it to me. They just like sent a screenshot to someone else who was interacting with me, and they were like, "This guy's a Nazi," and I was like trying to ask them like, "What? How? Where did you get like?" I tried going through my posts and replies, being like, "What did I say?" Like I couldn't make a logical connection between anything I'd say. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, Minoan, I'm racist enough for both of us, Sam. I'll carry you. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being okay with me not being racist. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks for coming, everybody. And I think we're done here. Cool. Thanks for coming. When the stream ends, please leave a comment. I would appreciate that.
Yes.
And like and subscribe if you're not, all that dumb crap. Patreon down below, $2 a month. I'm going to do office hours soon. People can come and talk, ask questions. We'll see how it works if people want it. Other than that, let me know what you want to see on the Patreon. I might do it because I need ideas. But yeah, bye everybody.